Welcome, one and all, to LZS Live. Well, we're kind of lying this time because we're not live because internet and Corona and stuff. I guess it's just servers that have problems. I think I'll blame YouTube because YouTube has reduced the quality of their videos so they can handle the massive inflow. I think maybe that's not doing enough, and let's just blame YouTube because that's what everyone does, right?
Okay. Yeah, it's YouTube's fault.
Okay, I'm gonna say a little bit more because this is the first ever episode, basically the first one that's gonna come out.
Whoop whoop!
Woo! Woo!
Celebration.
So
Good times, come on!
basically, this will just be a bit of a show about discussion where we're gonna ask interesting questions and see what interesting answers come from them. What the fuck was that?
You mean Ashens, the greatest YouTuber of all time?
What?
Oh my god, if you don't know Ashens, go look Ashens up. He is a god at YouTube. He reviews stuff on his sofa, on his brown look him up. Just, oh my god.
Okay,
Anyway.
that's something. But in this first ever episode, I would say we're gonna be talking about art versus entertainment, or where basically the schism would be between what is considered entertainment and what would be full-on art. And I wouldn't be able to do this by myself because it's not really something that I'm super knowledgeable about. Definitely not in multiple what would I say, facets of art. So I brought in some other people, which would be both of the members of the Rainbow Beasts Twitch channel, which would be Griff.
Yes.
Yeah!
Griff and Satan.
That's me, hi.
Yep, just Satan.
Yeah, actually, let's just get a round of applause, please. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That was to the live studio audience here. I'd just like to thank them for being here today. No, please, don't get up. Don't get up, please.
Oh my god,
just,
thank you so much.
Why have I been thrown? Why are you throwing pants at me?
No, I'm happy being single, but thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Cheers, guys.
So I hope there's gonna be enough similarities because I know my knowledge lies more in music, while your knowledge, both of you would be more in film. So there would probably be a bit of a common ground in there anyway, because it's both somewhere also on that scale of art and entertainment. So I think we would probably find some common ground somewhere.
Well, absolutely. Well, also, fun fact, the reason Becky and I know each other is because we were at college studying film and TV together. That is how we know each other. So we've both got the burning passion and the limited amount of knowledge.
I work in the entertainment industry.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that leans perfectly into the first question, which is more like an establishing question, which would be, what got you into film?
Well, I was born into entertainment, baby. You know what I mean?
That's not even a joke. That's literally not a joke. She was. Please share that life story with us.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us? This is about film, so tell me what got you into film first.
Wait, me?
Yeah.
Why me?
Because I want to hear it.
Well, I want to hear you.
Well, we're both here to get our opinions first. You can see more of this at the Rainbow Beast. Sorry.
It's just a lot of fucking bickering. Okay. Honestly, so I'm horribly dyslexic, and I'm saying horribly in a term I wasn't beaten to death with dyslexia, not in that form, but I am badly dyslexic. So I used to try and read a lot of books, but honestly, for me, I used to find more entertainment in TV and film because visually, that is how I receive most of my information. Like when I'm revising and stuff back in school, I rely a lot on visual information for it to stick in my brain. So I think it's the way my brain works means that film for me is just it is a language, and it's a language that when I was little, taught myself to try and learn because I was like, oh, I understand that. Like if someone read a book to me, I knew what was going on, but because of my relationship with words was poor, and to this day my spelling is still atrocious, and my handwriting looks like a child is having a seizure. I use my love became because it was a form of language that people used to use for entertainment purposes that I could understand. Like reading books was not how I used to entertain myself when I was a kid. It was film and TV. And also the greatest movie of all time, Jurassic Park, is just also another reason. Don't at me, okay, Rebecca, because I love the things that I love.
My name is Satan.
Anyway. I think that's why. I mean, also, like, I love film. I love a good frickin' story being told to me. I really like to separate the world that I'm in currently and step into someone else's mind and go, this is a story I want to tell. And I know that's a very generic answer, but honestly, I think it's a very generic answer because it's a greater passion that a lot of people share. So there you go. Boom. Were you ready for that?
Yeah, well, I think that's very interesting.
I feel that was definitely an interesting, especially comparison with the fact that you started off with the dyslexia as something that could drive a passion potentially. So that's an interesting.
Well, absolutely. I mean, a lot. I think the
a
greatest.
A lot of people in the industry do have dyslexia as well.
Well, Steven Spielberg, highly dyslexic. So like it is. Mm-hmm. It is this thing that creatives, because of something that they don't understand, kind of drives them to understand something that they do, and there you go. Dyslexia is a passionate thing. But anyway, that's my answer.
That probably also like kind of connects to the fact there's a lot of artists in different like types of art, like when it comes to like visual, like music or whatever, all that type of stuff. There's a lot of people who aren't really all that good in expressing their emotions. Just like in a like type of social setting. So I guess that's kind of similar thing there. So that's one thing.
No, absolutely.
You also touched on the fact of like videos as like movies as a type of language and telling a story.
Language in movies for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that's gonna come back at when we start the more general discussion as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think we can now go to Satan's story.
Well, so I used to be
sit down, kiddies,
and I had an argument with God. Wow, no joking. Sorry. Well, for film specifically, it's kind of almost the opposite of Griff in that I used to, and I still do, love to read. Books. When I was a kid, I had my head in a book. Everywhere I went, I would try and read at the dinner table. I would read in the car. I would read at school. I would always have a book in my hand when I was a kid. And people used to always say to me that I should like write a book or I would be an author. People always thought I'd be an author because I had a big imagination. I loved to read. Storytelling. I loved stories. I didn't like the real world. I would only ever talk about whatever I'd been reading, all of that stuff. But I don't have the patience to write a book. I'm not a writer. I do enjoy writing and I enjoy coming up with ideas, but I couldn't see myself sitting down and fully writing a whole book. It would never happen. And I think I kind of realised one day, I was like, you know, for me, it's about the stories. I enjoyed storytelling, and I was like, one of the best, like, things, all-round things for me is, I think one of the big ones that I always talk about is I watched a behind-the-scenes video of Alice in Wonderland, and because it's all green screen, it's all just visual effects, and I kind of was like, wait a minute, you can make a film, and you can make anything that you imagine happen on screen. Do you know what I mean? You can share your visual, whatever you imagined in your head, because I imagine so visually the things in my head when I read. I would see full colours and landscapes and people just in such detail. So I was like, wow, if you make a film, you can like show everyone that. You know what I mean? Because I didn't know how to write a book and actually make people sort of imagine what I wanted them to imagine I was seeing in my head. So yeah, I kind of landed on film and I was like, wow, I could, you know, direct a film, something like that. It seemed like the perfect mix.
I feel like that's something that kind of connects to something that I tweeted out a while ago. I mean, not that descriptive, but it was about the fact that if you are reading a book, you're basically getting your own interpretation of the words of the artist. So basically, what you're reading in a book, you're not really getting the direct thoughts of the writer like imprinted in your head at that point. So what you're reading at that point is still an interpretation, or what you're like trying to envision is like an interpretation through your own lens, basically. So it's not exactly the same as what a writer was intending. So there's a lot.
It's that thing that the people often say the books are better than the films because the films never seem to match up what people actually imagined.
And also, to bring it back to us being at college together, our lecturer always used to say read, because like he would teach us films, like he would teach us, the language of film, blah blah blah. But then he would say, but read, because if you are creative, reading, it allows you to make a movie in your mind, because you have to put they give you the description, they give you the words, it's like a script, but you have to visually create this. And actually, me and Becky, we always joke about this, but sometimes our dreams when we're asleep or when we read something, we always describe them to each other, and we both get this same cinematic scope of what we are thinking about, because like it is just the best way to visualize a story. And it really,
for example, even reading a book, I might read an introduction and I am almost imagining it in my head from the perspective of a camera. Do you know what I mean? I'm not imagining myself as a character. That's kind of how you imagine things. If you're reading a book, you're not imagining yourself. Maybe you are. I don't imagine myself as the main characters.
No, never,
ever. First person. You see it from a third person perspective. That's what film is. The audience is a third member of the story, just a silent one, and that's kind of what happens when you're imagining a story. And reading, I can imagine, like, for example, it's like an introduction of a corridor, like a spooky corridor. I can see myself floating down the corridor in a similar way to, for example, a camera might move in kind of like a panning tracking shot down the corridor or something along those lines. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's I can understand what you mean, because it's similar to the process of like writing a song. Even if you have, like, especially when it comes to the lyric stuff themselves, if you have the music, it basically sets like a ground tone of like an environment for like it builds up like a world, basically. The background music that you're gonna use, and then the lyrics that come over it are basically come from the fact of you and like trying to envision that world and trying to see what happens in that, and then maybe there's a main character type situation going on in like a story, but it's also with music, it's for me, it's often also like from the perspective of like a third person that's just there basically overviewing everything. So I can understand what you mean. It's like trying to, that's also where you find the emotional voice on like the like what type of emotion you want to convey. That's also basically by getting a bit of an overview of the situation or the story. So I
mean, I think you saying story, that is definitely something that kind of connects art in a big way. I would say one of the biggest things to do with any art at all is story. I think that is what art is, in my opinion. Anything from a painting to music to even dance, anything like that has a root in story. You know what I mean? And that's how we as humans kind of connect to art, because we connect to whatever story we can see in it.
Also, it's how we connect with each other.
Yeah.
Like, if you meet someone, you tell them a story or you say something about your life, but that is a story in itself. So as human beings, we are naturally born and driven to find, create, and tell stories.
Yeah, it's like the number one. And I would say, you said this was kind of about art and entertainment, right?
Yeah.
I would say art, the main thing to do with art is story. Entertainment kind of covers art as well sometimes, but also sometimes
it's a subsection.
Sometimes entertainment can just be a performance, somebody doing something sort of impressive, or a skill, or a show with, not necessarily a story. What makes it art is when there is a story, or even if that story is just a abstract emotion or anything like that. Story is what makes it art, in my opinion. You're people telling their stories through some sort of artistic medium.
But I mean, there's a you touched on something else there when it comes to like a more abstract emotion, that type of stuff. I feel like there's the biggest difference, and that's certainly also true for music, which is the fact that you sometimes have like stuff that's like art that's more descriptive, where it's like you don't really have much room for interpretation, where it's like, okay, they said this is all fairly literal, so you can just follow that along. And then you also have like the more subjective but also like more open-ended art, where it's more based on, for example, the emotion, but like the what lies behind that emotion or what drives that emotion, that's not necessarily always super clear, so the story is somewhat vague. And in that situation, you could have either, it can come down to what they do, either there's like a connection to some type of reality and there's some thread, like some red herring to follow, and people would say that, okay, maybe this type of art is something that's like deeply inspiring, or it has a deep message to it. Sometimes stuff can be vague just for vagueness sake as well, so that's also a thing, which people trying to be somewhat pretentious, but it doesn't really mean anything, or it doesn't even seem to mean anything to them, it's just a thing. I feel like there's a bit like that's like three entirely different ways of having art. Like either it can be very on the nose, let's say it's like, okay, this is very clear what this is, and then you have like the more vague, and that also splits off into like something that's deep or something that's just like vague for vagueness sake. Is that something that you guys can also recognize in movies?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely people in movies can sometimes, what's the word I'm looking for? Like you say, kind of be very literal, in the way that they record it, in the story that they're telling. I mean, I think it's a mistake often. You know, our teacher would always say, show, not tell.
Yeah. No, and that's something that whenever like Becky and I are watching a movie together, I always say to her like, "Oh, they didn't say that." There was, if I may use an example, we both went to go watch the newish Rian Johnson film Knives Out, and it was like my favorite film of last year. And there's a particular moment in the film where they are having a discussion about immigration, and the girl who is basically the main part of the story, she is an immigrant, but she went through the proper channels and blah blah blah, but this guy was like trying to support her, and he was like, I'm not racist, but subliminally he passed her a plate like she was a servant, or she was helping out. And it was this I turned to Becky and I was like, that he did not say anything, it was all body language in that moment. And that's the great thing about show and tell. It's the best way, because subliminally in your mind you're like, oh, he is actually a bad guy, because you didn't have to say like, oh, could you tidy this up? He passed this thing to her, and it was so natural in the scene. It was like you were there, and it was like, oh, he's actually a dickhead, because he's trying to back her up, but with words he's creating this facade, but his body language completely said a different thing.
Yeah.
And it's that thing as well of not presuming that your audience is stupid. You know, especially in this generation, the world has grown up watching media and film and art. It's a commonplace thing, and so people understand it, people can read it, people can see that. You don't need to tell people exactly what you're doing. You don't need to have like a line of dialogue, for example, saying, oh, you know, oh, look at that like idiot over there. You can show that person thinks that they're an idiot just by, you know, we all understand the language.
Body language, which again is a very natural thing as humans to understand.
But also visual language in film, you know, it's, you know, even down to lighting, you know, if the lighting is moody and dark, and, you know, we know there's something moody and dark probably happening. If the lighting is bright and happy,
if there's red light on a villain,
it's probably a happy thing.
If there's red light on a villain or someone's face, you're like, oh, this person means unwell, to the person in, say, the blue light. It is all within the frame, and you can all naturally keep up with what is going on within the story, or what is going on within the scene. And we call that, in the industry, mise en scène.
Mise en scène. That's not to say that art forms that do be very literal and kind of have like a very simple theme and a very simple message can be bad. But I do think more often than not the the best forms of art are the ones that have multiple meanings and multiple messages, and don't just tell you. It becomes an experience in that you have to kind of interpret it for yourself. I think that's usually the best forms for me.
I feel like
there is still some very literal stuff that is good, though.
Well, that's why I always... Oh, no, go on, Bram. What were you going to say? I was just going to give more examples.
That was similar with the example that you gave, for example. Like, the guy was basically saying, like trying to present himself as not racist, but then that was what he was saying, and maybe that was, like, his conscious thought as well. Maybe he was a character that truly believed that he didn't have racist tendencies in his body, and, like, basically was misinformed, or just didn't have, like, a lot of, like, what would I say, like, he didn't know himself well in that regard, maybe. And then at that point, you basically have the action, which basically contradicts what he's saying, which could lead to a lot of interpretations. It's like I said, like, either you could say, like, ooh, that guy's definitely racist, or, like, that guy... Or you could say, like, ooh, that guy does have some racist tendencies that he may not be aware of himself, or that type of stuff, which you could basically puzzle together.
Yeah. And when we talk about,
also...
like...
Sorry, carry on.
No. I was just going to say, when we talk about, like, saying that was a subliminal, like, that example, that was a very subliminal thing, like, it just happened naturally in a moment. But when people say, like, oh, but I watched a movie and this guy shot him in the face. Yes, that's a very blatant message that he is the bad guy. We're talking about very subtle things in an art form that you will pick up as an audience member, but it's not... to be honest, I've actually kind of lost my train of thought.
For a filmmaker, that is kind of your... That is your medium and your tool for the art, rather than a painter using different types of paints and brushes and techniques and stuff like that. For a filmmaker, it is the way that you present somebody, the way somebody is, like the way you characterize somebody. For some filmmakers, it can be very simple. It can be very obvious. They can just, it's exactly what you see on the screen, exactly what they say. Everything is black and white. And sometimes there's a place for that. Sometimes a character is very black and white and they do say everything out loud. And that's fine. But sometimes
and that's easy to absorb
has
medium.
Layers, and, perhaps the situation has layers, and it's just like in life, it's not clear what's, who's good and bad, and who did this and who did what, and if people lie as well. And a filmmaker's kind of tool is the way that they show that and what they use to sort of present that to the audience.
Yeah, because it all comes. Yeah, it's also the presentation of the characters themselves. That's a bit of a difference, because, like, when I talk about, like, music, for example, you're not really gonna have. You may have, like, characters that come across like they're, like, described and that type of stuff, like. But it's not like a character-to-character interaction a lot of the time, so it's more of like an internal type of monologue that happens a lot of the time. But I'm not saying that. Yeah,
it's almost more black and white. That is more of a literal thing sometimes.
Not always, because
strangely, music is incredibly abstract, but at the same time, in terms of like. Do you know what I mean? You're not gonna. It's less. I don't know. I don't know music as well, but it seems less likely that things will mean one thing.
Well, not
and sound like a different thing.
Well, that would be more if you go outside of, like, the realm of, like, pop music, because, like, a lot of pop music is just, like, very, very, very literal. It's just basically when you say, like, don't treat your audience as if they're, like, if they're stupid. I feel like sometimes
and that is actually something that our lecturer used to say.
That's
that is something our lecturer used to say. He was like, don't treat your audience like they're stupid. You've got to help them, but you can't go to them and say, yeah, that's a brick wall. No, you got to say to them, yeah, that's a brick wall, but you see it, right? Like, you don't turn to them, point and stare and say, that's a brick wall, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, I can understand what you mean. It's like more like you have to, like, subtle, like, put some hints here and there and just point in the right direction. And I guess it's all with, like, video, like, movies. It all comes down to, like, framing as well. And like you said, what was it, the mise en scène or something?
Yeah,
mise en scène. What was I going to say? Also, when not to feel ultimate satisfaction, but noticing, coming back to the example of the guy in Knives Out, it was really satisfying to notice that myself and almost feel like I'm on the same wavelength as the director or the creators behind it, because you think, oh, I noticed that too. You didn't like feed that directly to my face. It actually gives satisfaction to the audience member to go, I understand now. And I learned that via my own knowledge, my own thoughts of this particular scene. So it's actually quite a satisfying experience to watch a movie and just go, oh, that wasn't obvious, but I understand it.
Also, I want to bring back, because you said about like pop music and stuff like that being kind of a little bit more obvious about the meaning of the music. I would liken that to film in terms of, in music, in a pop song, they're often very repetitive, and they'll kind of say a lyric over and over again, make it catchy, easy to remember, all of that stuff. I would liken that to when in a film you are watching and somebody kind of like hints, for example, there's a bad guy and they say that's the bad guy about 25 million times.
Yeah.
Oh no, he's
like,
evil.
do you know what I mean? Or even if they're not actually saying it, but like, yeah, every time they walk on the screen, like somebody goes, oh no, that guy is back, we better run away. Like, rather than just telling you once, giving you a little hint, and that's all you need to know, and people can kind of guess that from themselves, and it's a more satisfying conclusion. And I imagine a similar thing happens in music in terms of the nuance of it. You don't need to repeat a lyric or say something like 25 times.
It's also a modern thing, because I feel like when you go back in like I think maybe sometimes you can see that in movies as well, but when it comes to like the more poetic usage of language, that's something that has really died out a lot. Definitely in music, because people are very, very, very literal with what they say nowadays in like pop music. But like to describe like love songs used to definitely have like more different ways of describing things than just being this clear about like what it is now. I feel like now it's just trying to describe something that like that's very general, or trying to keep it broad, but at the same time keeping it very. It's hard to explain, because a lot of like those like love songs are basically like written like towards, like they could be written towards like multiple people. Like it's like, ooh, let's make it so that a lot of people fall in this category.
Eyes and beautiful hair, and like, you know, every person who has brown eyes like kind of listens to it, and it's like, oh my god.
So in that sense, it's kind
And
of.
they're talking about me.
In that sense, it's kind of vague, but at the same time, like the description of everything that happens is like super literal. Apart from that. So that everyone can basically.
Although I have
understand
nothing to
it, even
say. Like music is
12-year-olds
not my forte.
that are just getting like 12-year-olds that are just discovering their sexuality can even understand that, which is probably the market they're going for, which is I don't know. I feel like that's kind of disgusting myself. I feel like it's the weirdest thing that I feel like. I don't know how it is with movies, but I feel like the weird thing about the marketing machine that's behind the art, which for music is mostly aimed at like the audience, which is like what 12 to 14-year-olds or something like that. And then you have obviously like other companies which are just basically more specific. They would aim at like older audience and that type of stuff. But I feel like the biggest things are just aiming for like the very, very young people. And it's got
it's those mainstream audiences. You've got a target demographic, and you know, pop music kind of aims and tries to cover the broadest category to kind of satisfy that demographic and, you know, get sales, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like it doesn't really have much of a message. I think it's more of like trying to get you to feel good emotions, basically. It's that type of thing. And I feel like that's a distinction that's being made, because obviously at one point I would have to bring it up, because we all remember like the tweets that were made. I think it was by it wasn't just Martin Scorsese, but it was someone else about the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like that is just mine. I never watch a Marvel movie and go, right, I want to see this level of detail in the story, and I want to see Iron Man really connect with this and that.
Yeah, I watch
go in and I'm like,
because I'm like, wow, did you see that alien guy just smash that guy in the face with a hammer? That's hilarious. Do more of that, please. I want to feel like a superhero.
yeah, exactly. Like, I've watched the first Avengers film 1,000 times. Mm-hmm. If you look at it, it's not the most amazing movie, but I love it because it's just like, I just turn off my brain. I'm like, yes, Thor just, with his single hammer, brought down this flying creature and has crushed several buildings of Manhattan, but I don't care because it looked cool as shit. And that's a different side of it.
When you were saying about how some art, you know, sometimes art is very simple and basic, I would say there you go. That's one that's kind of an example. It's Marvel is that. It's just there are superheroes. Sometimes the world is at risk and they save the world. And yes, there are kind of deeper themes within each character, but like really not that many. We're not watching an indie film that is, you know, an expression of some deep emotion or anything like that. It is just comic books on screen, and that's the whole point of it, is to watch it and feel good and be like, wow, did you see that? Look at that huge explosion, that visual, you know, these big battles and all of that. That's what's kind of enjoyable about it, and I'm not expecting more from it, and that's why I'm happy as a film student to go and watch it and enjoy it. I don't feel like I need to
because
be
we don't want to
or say, oh, but this isn't this, that, and the other, because this is just one type of art. If I wanted to get something deeper and, you know, work a little bit harder to get that, you know, see what the emotions are in a film, I will go and watch a film like that. Yeah,
you'll go watch an art house film for the very purpose of I really want to look at this film and deep dive go into its anatomy and how, where the director, writer, cinematographer, stunt creators, we want to know where they were going with those, with the expressions of the characters. But seriously, with Marvel films, we go see every single one. When we're like everyone else, we love to go see a fucking Thor movie and a Captain America, just because mindlessly we want to turn off our brains and enjoy ourselves. Not everything has to be oh my god, I can't think of a good film. What the fuck? Legit was like,
I'm getting the world of people. Thank you very much. Sorry.
I really can't think of a film. Wow, what the fuck, brain? Anyway, but we don't all want to go see an art house film. We do want to turn off our brains and just mindlessly enjoy something.
Yeah.
And they're both valid pieces of art that are both very enjoyable.
Because also, like,
Marvel is art. Like, some people might be like, oh, Marvel isn't art. Yes, it is. It's a film that people have put effort and storytelling and design into. It is a piece of art, and it is a good piece of art.
And also, Becky won't I don't know if both of you will understand this. I fucking love the TV show Friends, but I think it's art because some of it is quite good comedy. Like, I think some of it is quite well written comedy, but it's not the best thing I've ever seen, but I watch it because mindlessly it's just really great. And that is the beautiful thing about this art form. It takes many different forms, and some of it you just want to sit back and piss your pants with laughter, and some of it you want to sit there and go,
I mean,
oh, this is
that kind
deep.
Of speaks to comedy as an art form, which I would say it definitely is.
Oh, comedy is an art form. It is a difficult art form. Comedy is one of the most depressingly difficult things.
I think it's also one of the more personal ones, because I feel like when it comes to I don't think music has the opposite, by the way. When it comes to music, when it's like more sad music, like obviously because like the radio's gonna want something with a beat to keep the people going and just turn their cars into like a discotheque or whatever. I don't know what's up with that nowadays. Like, I feel like everything has like a use as well to some degree, and that's the type of like utilitarian look on art, and I feel like that's a bit of what a lot of people who are like very into it, like for example, bigger directors may not want to see, like that there's a bit of a, it's not just that it is something that's like, art is not just something that's like some vague notion of expression or something. It's there's also utility to it, like the way people use it, the way people engage with it, the way it speaks to people's emotions through their like own personal experiences that they had with it or with something that's vaguely connected to it. So it's I feel like there's a bit of a problem in basically recognizing that for like people who are very much like how would I say, like very much involved with it, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what, like something like, for example, the exact quote I think from Martin Scorsese was that he said what like Marvel movies aren't cinema, which
no, they're roller coaster rides.
Yeah, and I feel like that stems from like, it's everything's basically a lot of stuff. It's not, we claim as human beings, we claim to be very like logical creatures or something compared to like animals and that type of stuff, but we are very much driven by our emotions as well. Mm-hmm. So I feel like when someone like a Scorsese says that, it's like from a type of I feel like almost some type of jealousy that people aren't looking at like what people would maybe claim to be higher art with the same regard as they would be, or spent the same.
Also, can I just say that?
Go.
No, I was just gonna say that quote. He wasn't fully like their shit. He didn't dislike them, because actually he came out and said, yeah, when I watch them, sometimes I enjoy them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that comes down to the point where me and Becky were saying, not every film has to be depressing as shit, and I don't want to have to cry at this movie, because you don't always want to be facing the reality of, oh man, life is really depressing.
Well, I think also with like Marvel, it makes you watching a Marvel film can make you feel an emotion, and that's really all you need in a film for it to kind of have been a success. If you've watched it,
biggest example, fucking Infinity War.
Feel something, and you have felt an emotion that is not one that you would have felt otherwise. Then that's unless it's like you're feeling, I don't know, boredom. Then maybe it's not a success.
Can we advise? Yeah, can we also advise you to watch something completely different?
I mean, it could help you to not feel boredom if it's a good movie.
If it makes you feel happy or sad or, excited or powerful, then that is a successful film, That's all you need.
And that also Wonder Woman. That is a film that fully empowers, I think, a lot of people when they watch it. Not just women, but many different communities and many different individuals. So we don't... And also, that is cinema that goes... Oh, I can't... I've lost my words. I've fully... God damn it.
I mean, also, similarly to that is... do you know what? Never mind. My mind went blank as I started speaking.
Oh, wow. We're fully breaking down.
Well,
this is the end.
In case you didn't know, we share a brain cell, so...
Yeah, and Becky stole it from me last week, so...
But
I haven't received it since.
What I feel like is also very similar to this is, like, you have people who are, like... Which is, well... It's blown up nowadays as well with the activism and that type of stuff. I feel like there's all people whose whole lives are basically based around like fighting for a certain cause, and they basically would like add people for not doing that at the same time. Like even when there's just people who normally would, but they're just taking a break to basically for their own sanity and that type of stuff. I feel like it's the same with that type of like high art. Like sometimes you need something like that, like something like, ooh, this has a profound message, which just like where you learn something new or something about yourself even, or something about the world that you didn't know, and it changes your outlook or something. That can be very, very important now at sometimes. But at sometimes you just have had enough of like the bad things in the world, because if you look at it now, there's like a lot of stuff to basically want to basically escape from at this point. So you would want to...
Oh,
certainly
absolutely.
People in film for sure, but also I'm sure in many art forms, can fall into a trap as they become, kind of an expert in it, and they understand it deeply, and understand it in new levels, in that they stop enjoying the simple stuff, and they don't see it as a good art form. But people forget that, like, not everybody, for example, has studied film, and not everybody understands all of these little nuances, and they just enjoy a film because they had a good time watching it.
Also,
you can become snobbish with that, but that's all you need. That's what most people don't study film. Most people don't know what all the names for all of the shots that you could possibly use are. Most people don't know that by doing that little one like camera move in that moment, that it felt weird, or that the edit felt weird. Most people won't notice those little mistakes because they haven't studied film. They don't understand it, same as many art forms. And people can kind of become snobbish and be like, oh, but this isn't a good film because it doesn't do this, that, and the other, and it's not, actually, if I analyse it, all of these things kind of show up as really obvious mistakes. But if people didn't notice it, and they just watched it, and they enjoyed it, then
absolutely.
It wasn't do you know what I mean? How bad of a mistake can it have been?
An example of that, I mean, when we started our TV course, at the beginning, our lecturer, he was like, just to let you know, when I teach you all these techniques, you cannot look at film the same way ever again. And we have always said that was the truest thing one of the truest things he ever said, because now when we walk out films, because we still love films, both of us passionately still adore going to the cinema and watching a movie together. Like, it's one of our funnest activities. But it is always a curse that we know that, that thing felt wrong, or that story, or this script isn't airtight because of that thing, and that's only because we were taught. And my biggest example of Becky saying like you have to switch it on and off, to enjoy a movie. The latest Star Wars. I think it's a crap movie because it is a poorly put together film. Like, nothing works in it. But just sitting there, and if I try and involve myself as just as a fan, or I was just mindlessly going into it, highly enjoyable in aspects. Absolutely, it's one of the funnest things you could see. But that's just. Yeah, that's how it is.
I do the same thing with Doctor Who. I absolutely love Doctor Who. I won't hear a bad word against Doctor Who. It's just a show. It's just my guilty pleasure. I love it a lot. But if I sat and watched Doctor Who with a fresh mind and I didn't love it beforehand, or I didn't care about characters beforehand, I would just sit out and point so many mistakes. There are some awful, awful episodes. I mean, it's a very big show, so of course it would have those awful, awful episodes. But
yeah, definitely.
Even the awful, awful ones, I still enjoy all of those episodes because I get a chance to go and watch characters that I love and experience more of a universe and a world that I enjoy.
Exactly.
And that's all I really needed. Obviously, sometimes I can still get a bit disappointed and be like, oh, that episode was a little bit oof.
And actually, another example is Becky and I were Becky's watching the Star Wars films for the first time, and she's just turning around to me and saying, Griff, this doesn't work, or that was a bit strange. And I go, yeah, you have to just ignore it, because that's the thing. Like, if you look at it with these eyes that we or artists have, you do see it in a different form. But like nostalgia or the pure love of something, you have to just switch it off and go, fuck it, just sit here and just enjoy it, because it's this world and someone took time to create it. And yeah, it might not be great, but just if you love it, just get on with it and enjoy what you can out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I could have a similar thing. I'm not really someone who's like super nostalgic. I don't really have that all that much. Like, it's something from the past doesn't really necessarily, or something that was good to me in the past doesn't necessarily speak to me anymore. I don't really have that much, but I had a similar thing with with music, that when it gets too simple at one point in time, it didn't really speak to me, which gets you to the point where you get basically into like stuff that's basically more technical. But then you just realize sometimes I think it can come down to like balancing as well, because if something gets too technical, sometimes it loses like a bit of like the emotional aspect of it, like the raw emotion behind it. It's definitely a thing you can have with music. If it's like a lot of stuff that's too technical and like too cut and dry, and then like afterwards it's like the in studio editing is done too well, it becomes a bit. You can still hear like all everything that went into it, but like sometimes the raw emotion of stuff is just like gets lost if it gets too technical. And one of the things that I had with that is, for example, I still don't really like pop songs, because there's just not much to them. I don't think there's never a message to them to begin with, which story is very important.
Absolutely not. They're not.
Very important to me.
But you can still bop to them sometimes.
Yeah. Well, as someone who does genuinely, and Bram will hate me saying this, but I do just listen to pop. Mm-hmm. Like, that is how the music I love and enjoy and I listen to and sing to. But that is a thing. Like, you know a deeper meaning and understanding of it, and I don't. So I just go for a basic level of, yeah, that's got a good beat. Yeah. I like that lyric. I'll scream it in the car.
A film of just enjoying something in a different way. You might enjoy music in a much deeper way and be listening for those little things and those little extra meaning and whatever it is that makes you enjoy music, whereas somebody else is just like, oh, I can bop. Well, I'm bopping my head and that's all I need.
It also comes down to like personal philosophies and like I said before, like the utility of the art itself, like how do you use it. For example, when it comes to like pop music, if I go out somewhere and just like what we want to do is dance, then obviously it's gonna be something like that, some more like pop music, because you just need to have the nice rhythm to it that's easy to dance to, a bit of variety so they can do some different dance moves and some different rhythms and that type of stuff. So that's interesting. But like it's different from when you, for example, let's say you're having a barbecue and you're just eating food and talking to your friends. You're gonna put on some different music at that point as you would as you would just want to dance. for example. Or if it's a romantic evening that you have with someone, you want to put on some background music, you're gonna put on something different than you would if you want to go dance, or the barbecue example that I gave earlier. There's a bit of a utility to art, like I said, and I have that definitely with music. It kind of feels like, what do I need? Does it need to? Is it also, when it comes to like actively listening? This is the closest that I get to like the, for example, if you guys speak of like a art house film or something, the closest that it would be for music is like, is it gonna be something that I'm listening to while I'm doing something else, or am I gonna be actively listening to this music? Do I want something that sounds interesting that I can just listen to, and that's all I'm gonna do at this point? That's I guess closer to if you guys would, for example, go watch an art house movie compared to like your regular mainstream movie. You could put on...
Yeah, I'm going to approach those with a different mindset, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, also, they're also not for everyone, because like when I turn around to my parents and I say like, I want to watch this movie tonight, and I tell them the description, you know, it's like, there's this kid and he's been abandoned by his mum, and there's a natural disaster,
only
and
art house movies you can think of, only sad ones.
Yeah, well, because they are though,
happy
because they're
ones.
like, I don't know what you're on about. No, I know there are, but then they're like, oh, I don't want to watch that. So let's watch this movie about a Mexican drug ring and they're all shooting each other. That is genuinely like the movies my parents like to watch, because they're like, it's an easy good guy and there's an easy bad guy and they get away with the money, and
I think
that's
also
it.
those two mindsets that we switch between, we couldn't enjoy each of those movies with each of those mindsets, if that makes sense. Like if I'm in a mindset to watch kind of a basic like Marvel film or something like that, or you know, just an action kind of crazy whatever, I wouldn't be able to enjoy like an art housey movie in that mindset, and sometimes I'm just not in the mood because I don't want to have to concentrate or think about it, or you know, I don't want that. Sometimes those movies are bad because I'm not in the mood.
Yeah.
And sometimes
Big-
I am in a mood
greatest
where I'm going to
example.
overanalyze it, and I want to be blown away by the cinematography and the music and every single choice that anybody made in the whole entire film.
There's the greatest example I've got of Becky not enjoying a film, and there's me completely in the right mood. We watched, I don't know if anyone's watched this, but there's a movie called Booksmart. It's directed by Olivia Wilde.
I didn't mind that. You keep saying
No, I know.
It.
No. But there was a moment. No. There's a moment in the film where they take drugs, not knowing, and they turn into dolls. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say about it. But Becky just, she just was not in the mindset. I'm not saying you disliked it, Becky. I'm just saying she would turn and she was like, what the fuck is going on? She just physically could not understand. I don't know.
That point was fine. Like I was like, this.
Yeah, we were laughing and giggling, and yeah.
And then.
But you look it up. Go to YouTube. Look up Booksmart doll scene, and it's so weird. It's really.
It's just not what I was expecting. It really didn't.
It takes a left turn. A freaking left turn. Oh, it's amazing though. I've never laughed so hard, and Becky just I can't describe your face.
Oh my God.
Or
Because you were just confused.
What's that film? Which I think I had watched before, but it's not a horror. It's kind of a parody of a horror.
Was it one that you and me watched?
Yeah, but I think we watched it with other people as well, and it's
Alien. Alien.
No, not Alien. It's not really a horror. It's more of a comedy. It's where there's people controlling the horror.
Cabin in the Woods.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think
I love that movie.
Basically, the way that Griff introduced the movie, he was like, "This is a really good movie. You're gonna love it. Like, it's definitely not what you think. It's gonna be really good." So in my head, I was thinking that it was a comedy parody of a horror movie, and he said, "It's not what you think. It's gonna be really good." So I was expecting an amazing horror movie that would surprise me, and that's not what it is. It's not a horror movie like that. Do you know what I mean?
It's the very thing that she thought it was going to be.
I think it is a good film, and I think I would have enjoyed it, but I was just in the complete wrong mindset coming into it. It's not what I expected, and I was like, oh, okay, this has been totally ruined, because now I'm like, do you know what I mean? It hasn't surprised me. It's not...
So...
Nothing surprised me as I was watching it, and all of the
and then
big
we come into
that were supposed to be funny didn't get to me because I was just watching Griff, and like Griff was laughing before they even happened and all that, so it kind of ruined the mindset for it, which is not really your fault. But
No, but it is though. It's my curse. Becky's always like, Griff, whenever you recommend me something and you say like it's the greatest thing, I just go with the wrong mindset, and then it just turns out that I don't love it as much as everybody else. But that's just how it happens, and then it comes
with low expectations. I would have loved it.
But then it comes down to expectations and like movies and you know, moving away. I know we're talking about Artful, but moving away from it, like when there's a new Marvel film, we have expectations because we're like, oh, we've seen Marvel films before. We know what comes in them. We know what happens in them. And then like you go on the journey, and then you're like, oh, that's not what I expected, or it's like exactly what I thought.
A lot of people didn't like Thor Ragnarok, which I love. Thor Ragnarok.
But
I think
it's
the
a great
best
fucking
Marvel
movie.
It helps that Taika Waititi is my favorite director, but it's because people weren't expecting it. It was a little bit of a depart from the kind of genres that had come in past Marvel movies. It kind of departed from the character even a little bit. And so people were like, oh, this isn't what I was expecting when I came into the cinema.
I feel like that's kind of strange coming to that, because I feel like the part of what the longevity of the Marvel movies is, and we're still talking about them, is I feel like they have done some slight tweaking to the formulas when they may start to get stale, so that people would still stay involved, because I feel like there are similarities to, for example, Thor Ragnarok and the Guardians of the Galaxy, and I feel like after those movies, like a lot of there's more humor was injected to the other movies that came afterwards as well, and it kind of changed it up a bit, and I feel like that was kind of just enough to basically keep it going. Well, and now we're not gonna have movies for a while, so I feel like when they come back, maybe that's gonna work out.
Oh my god, do you guys remember movies? What? Wait, hold on. So now we're in the apocalypse. I was literally about to ask that question. What was the last thing you watched in cinemas? I think it was... Now, in my head, it was either Little Women with my gran, which is a nice one. That's a really sweet one. But it was actually Onward, the Pixar movie, and I went to go watch it by myself after work. That was the last thing, and it wasn't a shit movie. I cried. I fully cried.
I also didn't think that was a shit movie. Just a lot of people.
No, I quite liked it. I thought it was quite. I can't say that because that would just ruin it for Becky ever watches it.
I mean, it wasn't anything like super amazing or anything, but it was still good. So I mean.
Also, can I just say that sometimes a movie that is not well received is kind of encapsulated in history? Like, sometimes not a shit movie, but a movie that is so divisive is capitalized and is just like, it's not a classic, but it's a movie that everyone, I can't think of an example, but like, everyone's like, this is shit, and then the other half is like, this is amazing. Those kind of movies, those kind of, the different ways that they're told, they're really encapsulated. Like, I'm fully lost where I'm going with this, but... story of my life. I just start conversations, so I don't know how to end them.
You don't mean movies that are like, it's not like you don't
need the most
to the Room,
that's
for example,
Thanks,
where the movie is clearly bad, but it's just like so bad it's good for some people.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the flip side of it. Art doesn't always have to be the most driving force. Sometimes the movie is just, with the way it goes and flows, is so divisive that you're just like, oh, have you seen this movie? Yes, and I disliked it. And have you seen this movie? Yes, and you're like, oh, well, it's a movie that has brought people together to create that conversation, which is also another thing about great movies and TV shows.
And art.
And art.
I feel like
all of art is good because of the way that it can create conversation with people.
Yeah, and that's why I was going, like, create conversations. And to bring it back, we were talking about this before we started recording. I brought up to Bram the final season of 13 Reasons Why. Now, Becky does not like that show.
It's an awful show. It perpetuates bad things about mental health and the way that you should handle things like suicide and depression. It is bad. Do not watch it. Never watch it. Bad show.
But flip side of that, when it first came out, because we were in college when the first season came out, it got everyone talking about mental health, suicide, and that was the reason the book was written. That is the reason that the creators created the show. Yes,
I know, but it creates bad conversations about it.
No, I know, but it started it. It's better. But it's better than there not being a conversation, because like a lot of people just don't like to talk about this stuff.
I think 13 Reasons Why glorified suicide, and that's why.
No, it did. I'm not arguing against that, but I'm saying it started the conversation between our young age group, and that was the one good thing I take away from it. like the one good thing that came out of the reason of its creation. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not. I purely just watch it because I'm now 4 seasons in and I'm finishing it.
Well,
but that's an example. Like Becky hates it, and I thought it was okay.
It's just,
but
I think it's
that's
not
the
good
reason.
for people, especially for people who experience any of the mental health issues that are depicted in the show. It's just very unhealthy the way that anything is kind of depicted, and it's very triggering, and just That's
No,
all I'll say on
agreed,
that.
Yeah.
completely agreed. But the example I'm saying is it started conversations, and like maybe not a nice one between the two of us, but I have had stories told of me that a movie or that particular show or any show started a conversation between different people, which is great, because if that is a product of it in a good way, then let's at least take some form of that being a good thing in the world instead of
what you
something.
could say potentially, if it's like a bad example, like for example, 13 Reasons Why. I mean, I can't personally really say much about that, as in like, because I've never been someone who was like depressed. I'm like, my thing is like, because depression seems to like more something that reflects on yourself. My reaction to stuff would more be like hateful, so it's more projected outwards. If I have a problem with something, it's not gonna it's not gonna affect my mental space in a way like sadness. It's gonna be more like anger. For example,
Right, yeah, I get you.
I had, for the longest time with this whole like Black Lives Matter stuff that went out right now, I wanted to tweet something, but it took me like 4 days before I could tweet something that wasn't about ripping cops' heads off and shoving them up their fucking asses. So I just really needed the time to
Iconic.
basically calm myself down before I could say something about that was like helpful to someone, not just something that was just spewing more hate, like putting more fire on fire. So I'm not necessarily someone to talk about like that type of stuff, so I don't know what effect like something like 13 Reasons Why would have on people who like have more of a problem with like chemical imbalances that cause like sadness, that may even be like irrational, that type of stuff, or people who have like genuine reasons to want to commit suicide that are maybe just like what would I say, like situational rather than do with chemical imbalance and that type of stuff. So I don't really, I can't really say anything about that, but I do see that a lot of people seem to be pointing that out, so I can only assume that that's, and a lot of people who are in the field of psychology are pointing that out, so I can only go with those people and say like, these
I
people
just
know.
think it definitely has some very actively harmful messages about the way to deal with things, that especially as it has a very much of a teenage audience, and it feels like a lot of things are done to make it feel edgy and truthful and all of this, that and the other, but it's not actually giving you any real tools of how somebody who's actually suffering through that stuff could deal with it, you know. And that's the problem with it, is it makes it seem like things like giving people messages and making them feel bad.
What I would
is the way to deal with
no,
stuff
absolutely,
like that.
like it's
Bullying and blah,
revenge.
blah, blah.
It's
What I
revenge.
do see
Honestly,
there, for example,
it's untasteful.
The one thing that
It's not tasteful at all.
wanted to say is like, what I do see there, for example, is it does make it seem like there's nowhere to go, for example, because in that certain specific, like, there was nobody willing to listen, nothing there. That's the first thing that's like not realistic, because like a lot of the times you will have people to turn to, like there will always be someone to turn to, except when you really don't know anyone. And then there's still like gonna be people who have like, who are not like people you actually directly know, so like counselors and that type of stuff. There will always be someone, I assume, in that situation that you could try and talk to, but there it makes it seem like, oh, there's nobody there. And then it also makes it seem like Hannah achieved some kind of victory at the end, which is...
Yes.
Yeah, no,
That's the main problem.
it's very
It
vengeful.
makes it seem like she's won by, you know, the things that she's done, which is not true. She's... Do you know what I mean? That's not the way to go about things.
But before we get too much about this thing itself, what I was gonna say is...
Yeah, we're moving more into just...
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was gonna talk to like art that may have a similar like reception, where it's like the message is bad. For example, let's say that like art that has a bad message, which is this is an example, and I think we clearly brought this up as like that exists now, and we did provide an example, and we even provided why it's bad. For example, in this case, I think like art that is bad does have one upside to it, and that is the counter reaction to it. Like all the stuff that comes after, like the discussion, and then people saying like, okay,
Yeah,
that's some
like Griff
bullshit
says, the
here.
conversation.
Yeah. And even like counter art maybe that comes out that basically tries to rectify the mistake made by that type of art, for example. Yeah, if I want to give some type of example of stuff that happens. So I think that's the only upside that something like this could have. And if there's enough of that...
Certainly I think art often has... there's a problem with art because certainly kind of the entertainment side of art, where art is there to... For example, film, which is there for people to watch and make them feel something. There's a level of responsibility there for it to give you messages that are healthy and don't glorify things that, you know, somebody might watch and be like, oh my god, yeah, that's so cool. Like, if I just kill this person, everything will be fine in my life. Because unfortunately, people do get sucked in by film and TV, and they do take advice from those things. However, at the same time, I consider art to be an expression of the self. Do you know what I mean? And somebody who perhaps feels very tortured and feels like perhaps they have very dark thoughts or they have things that aren't healthy about themselves, art, expressing that through art, is a healthy way for them to kind of express that stuff. Yeah. So it's difficult to say where the place for those things are.
I mean, it definitely comes in when... well, I feel like something like it's too bad that we're stuck with this example now, but with the 13 Reasons Why, I feel like that doesn't come from someone who was in that situation. I feel, and that's maybe one of the problems. It's not self-expression. It's just trying to express someone else's way of thinking. But that's, I mean, that doesn't really work. And I feel like there's definitely art like that. I'm not gonna say that it always fails, like trying to make art through someone else's perspective. That could be enlightening. Definitely, if you find something within yourself to click with that person's perspective or way of thinking, I think that could... Yeah, I think... There has to be something that connects you to it.
Yeah, I think perhaps it comes in the way that it's presented. I think if it's presented in a way that makes it seem like this is great, this is exactly what you should do, this is my, like, advice, then that's bad. If it's presented in a way of like, you know, this is a story, this is fantasy, this is from somebody else's perspective, but I haven't really done the research to that person's perspective, this is just what I think, do you know what I mean? Then maybe that's okay. Whereas if you are trying to show something and tell people how to live or what to think or give people advice, you have to be clear in, for example, saying this is not my experience as the writer, or this is not my, as you know, as the creator of this art, this is just what I think people experience or people say, or this is what this person has told me through my research, and that's it. You know, it has to be clear kind of where it's coming from, otherwise people might, like we say, they see it glorified and think that it's okay.
I mean, It also comes down to the fact, like, because now we're talking about art as, like, the portrayal of art and, like, even the moral aspect of, like, art, which is kind of a harder thing, because for me, personally, I feel like the whole thought of morality is very, very subjective, eventually. I don't think there's an actual wrong or right way to go about stuff, but I do feel like there are, like, effects of actions, and like effects that are beneficial for everyone, and effects that are not beneficial for anyone, or just beneficial for one person, or just for like a small majority of people, or that hurt a minority of people, or even a majority of people. So I feel it's not really the easiest way to say if something is good or bad. That's not really the easiest discussion to be had, but there's definitely a place for like people's own, like, what would I say, interpretation of what is good and bad, or people's own morals in art. I feel like there's definitely a place for that. And one of the examples that we have now is people pushing for more diversity, which is then received by people who are more reactionary for like, oh no, there's more black people in this movie, and somehow that's a problem for them. I don't really get that.
Yeah, it's like when people make like war films, like old films or war films usually, and they say, and it's all a white cast, and then they say like, oh, but that's because I'm trying to be accurate to the time, because there wouldn't have been, like, fuck off. Yeah. There's always been black people around.
Where's the troops from India, for example? I can't
speak too much on the topic as a white person. I don't really have the authority to say much about it, but Black people have been around all the time, and any white creator who has a large platform has a responsibility to represent that. Do you know what I mean? Regardless, is it an old film, anything like that, those people were still there. Everybody,
Yeah.
diversity has always existed.
I mean,
and so it's kind of that is a harmful thing to do. That is stupid. Whereas if perhaps somebody created a film that had a lack of diversity, but it was because the film was showing that is bad, and it's kind of making a point about it.
I mean, if your movie wants to be like accurate about that stuff, then you would have to see like that. If you really want to be like that type of like a what would it be like if you really want to go that accurate and want to potentially harm your art with like being over accurate, then you would probably have to go and look like, okay, we're going to make a movie about World War One. What was the percentage of black soldiers? What's the percentage of Indian soldiers? What's the percentage of this soldier in this legion? That type of stuff. Like, then they would have to go that far, and I don't think anyone would do that. But like, some movies really make it seem like there were no people of like other races in like in the First World War, when there was like,
which is just a lie. That's just false.
Yeah, I mean, India was aligned with aligned, not like they had much of a choice, but they were still part of England at that point. What was it, the first?
Yeah.
With the First World War, I guess. I know that I'm supposed to be somebody who studied to be a history teacher, but my history is just like slipping away from me slowly. But
No, you're absolutely right. There were whole platoons of, because of course you had I'm going to use this example of the Germans and the Allies were formed of what was left of the British Empire at the time. You had the USA, you had the UK, you had India, you had. Wow, I really have forgotten history. But there were, like, almost everyone was involved.
I'm even convinced that when it comes to India, that they were the ones that had to handle, like, some of the more, like, heavy artillery for the British troops. Like,
honestly, I could not make a comment. I can't remember anything from fucking GCSE history.
Like, I think
it left my brain.
I remember them using the, like, what are they, like, the type of, like, projectiles that they would fire from those, like, tubes that are basically, like, the incoming... to basically clear so that they can advance. So they're basically running ahead, basically trying to blow up stuff and trying to blow up other soldiers, like to gain ground quicker. So they were basically directly in the line of fire. So when you show like a front line in some situations, it would be very strange to not have people of other ethnicities. And what I find particularly strange is people complaining about female superheroes, which have been around for fucking ages.
Oh, I know. That's... Ugh. I don't even know what to say about that, because it's just so stupid. Like, I just can't even think of like an argument, because I don't know what argument there is for it.
No,
so I don't know how to address an argument against that. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, yes, obviously female superheroes. Like, what is your problem? Yeah. It's superheroes as well. It's superheroes.
They've been written.
They have superpowers. How is that not the unrealistic thing? Are you stupid? Like, what? Like, yeah, okay. Sure, if people could fly, only men could fly, because that's the realistic thing about that. Thank you, sure.
Even though in the real world...
no one can fly. It's not
no
a thing.
one can fly.
I mean...
I it's not like I don't refuse to talk on this topic, but honestly, I'll get fucking mad if, like, it's just, I don't get it. I don't fucking get it. Why?
It's fantasy. Like, where's no argument for it? It's just...
Well, it's also... If I may, and I am going to use Star Wars as an example, so I do apologise. But with the latest films, you've got a character in the first film character. I can't talk. In the Force Awakens, the first film in the reboot trilogy was Rey, and everyone screamed that she was a Mary Sue. If you don't know what a Mary Sue is, go Google it, because I don't really want to give a full reasoning. But everyone screamed that she was a Mary Sue, and actually, if I flip side it, Luke was a Mary Sue. If you're going to talk about it, you're only screaming about this because she's a bloody woman. And also, I don't fucking care. This is a universe where people lift things with their minds, and there's a laser sword, and there's a bad guy, and there's a fucking planet-killing laser. I don't give a shit.
A Mary Sue is essentially any character who is just like absurdly perfect or competent, or everything goes right, or they have plot armor, that it just seems ridiculous.
And, like, I know people people
Like they have no
will-
weakness for some reason.
And another example, people will use like Vader being Luke's father. Yeah, but also in the latest film, something happens to Rey, which I won't spoil because the film's not been out a year yet, so I don't want to spoil it.
Spoiler alert
but
about Star Wars. I haven't watched it yet, like me.
also, yeah, I'm trying to avoid saying it because then, like, at least Becky will know something happens. But something happens that does drive her to have upset, and it's a weakness, but she overcomes it, and it's just bullshit. Because also, whatever. Just because she's a woman, she can be powerful in any fucking form.
That's the point. Yeah, like you said, it's fantasy. It's a genre where people are supposed to be kind of absurdly powerful and competent because, you know, people kind of can project onto that, and it's a form of escapism and feeling like, yeah, there is a world in which things could be perfect and that things could go well.
Yeah, it's just like,
you know, that's why it's good.
It's more of like a hope
Exactly.
thing, I guess, for like people that they have something to like maybe dream about.
Oh,
something to
absolutely.
escape to.
Certainly showing those characters with flaws can help so that people can relate and feel like you don't have to be perfect and that having a flaw is okay. But at the same time, Mary Sue's have their place. Sometimes I want to feel like a Mary Sue, honestly.
Yeah, sometimes a Mary Sue works, and who the fuck cares?
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely something. But it's the same. It's like you said, like they only complain about it when it's like a female character as well for some reason.
It is screamed about when it's a female character. And also, I have friends.
Every single action hero ever is a Mary Sue. Like,
Yeah.
hello.
Exactly.
If you watch any action film, you know, with like a big strong guy who's like, I'm gonna kill you and your family for doing that to me, and blah blah blah, and I'm gonna like Fast and Furious franchise. Let's be real.
Oh, don't.
They're all Mary Sues.
Especially Dom Toretto. Vin Diesel wrote that character to just never die.
Yeah.
But you know what I find funny about that as well, Dan? That a lot of people claim that it's no, it's not sexist. But then why are you only doing it, like complaining about it when it's a woman?
But
like a woman.
Yeah.
But honestly, I have friends who think Mary Sue plays literally to only female characters.
Yes, and that's also the thing. The problem with it is people often say
I hate the
it as a
title. I
derogatory
fucking
thing.
hate the title.
People say Mary Sue often as a bad thing, and I mean even the name Mary Sue. Like, why? Do you know what I mean? Why can't it be a John Smith?
Why can it not be a
It's also
a Casper James?
to me it's also what it implies, because if you say like if you don't
Tried to think of
if
some
you don't apply it
neutral name.
if you don't apply it to man, like if you can't really say like, ooh, that's a Mary Sue, basically you're implying like, oh yeah, only women have flaws and all women have flaws. It's like, okay then, that sounds inherently
Or
sexist.
it's like implying that only men can be perfect, then it's fine. But like a woman that's perfect, oh, that's unrealistic. Sorry, dude.
It just sounds sexist in nature, and then people are, no, it's not sexist.
But it is.
It's funny. It's funny. And
Anyway, if you think all those things that we just said, good on you. You suck.
Get out of here. Leave.
Get out. This is an inclusive environment.
Please leave immediately.
yeah,
Go away.
Guess what, guys? I'm a woman.
I mean,
Goodbye.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I'm a gay man, so.
I mean, you may say that, like, I'd rather have those people stay and eventually, hopefully, change their mind, but maybe that's wishful thinking on my
Yes,
part.
either leave or open your brain and say, and let us pour some
Or
knowledge
let us
into your brain.
educate. Yeah, let us educate you a little.
And prepare to say apologies to everyone, you know.
But it's a whole thing. Like, it's kind of weird. Like when you think about it, like, what do you really have to lose at that point? Let's just think from the fact that I really find it already kind of hard to basically like only connect with characters that are just like white men or something. I feel it's weird that somebody would have that handicap.
You know what's weird? I was listening to a podcast, my favorite podcast the other week, and they literally spoke about this. Are there people out there that only watch films that they can immediately, like, very easily project themselves into the main character? And it was really interesting because you giggle, but I'm very sure there are people out there in the world who go, Oh, is he white? Yes. Does he only like women? Yes. Does he have some form of problem that revolves around the workplace? Yes. Then I will watch that movie 100 times over. I'm pretty sure those people exist. But it's like,
I mean,
is that
it's also
really...
people that get offended when a movie doesn't have a straight white male as the main character, and they're like, oh, but you know, for example, one example that I think of is a film that a lot of people said was bad, which was the Ghostbusters, that actually had a female cast in it. That movie was not trying to beat the classic Ghostbuster films, or do you know what I mean? It wasn't trying to be anything like that. It was just, for me, it was a fun film that I really enjoyed because I felt empowered, because all these, you know, crazy women were running around fighting ghosts.
Well,
and it was a Ghostbusters that I could watch and relate to. And people were offended by that when there's already several other Ghostbusters movies that they could go and watch that have a big old cast of white straight men that they're, you know, can happily go and enjoy.
And if I can use an example, about a year and a bit ago, there was a movie called Love, Simon, and it's about a white gay. It's about a white gay man, and he's in high school, and he's trying to come out, and he's in his senior year, and he's falling in love with a dude, and it's all secret because they have to keep it secret because society is shit. But I turned to Becky and I cried, and I was like, I relate to this.
And also the problem with, you know, it's a good film, but there is a problem with it in that. That is like one of the only popular films, but it has to be, the whole film has to kind of be about the fact that it's a
honestly
gay
though
white man. Why are there, you know, people are offended if there is a film and the main character happens to be gay or happens to be, you know, trans or a lesbian or anything like that. Why don't we have films where that is just normal? That is just not even spoken about. It's just a fact about the character, and the story can be something else completely different.
The one thing that I feel is the problem there is like for a lot of people. I mean, if the movie is like inherently about that, like you can't really change much. It's like this movie is about a gay dude, but the main character is apparently straight. It's a straight white front that's just there and has nothing interesting happen to them. He's just there. He's just his best friend. I mean, that would suck, right? I mean, who would watch that movie?
Well.
It's just to have like a straight male protagonist.
Yeah.
It's gonna be
movie with just. I want a movie with just one singular character who is a straight white man, who is just the token straight white man who does everything over the top exactly how we, like, you know, like is always drinking a beer and like.
He's wearing a tank top.
Really stereotypical things for the entire movie, and that's all that they're there for.
He's drinking the beer in one hand and a weight in the other. I don't know what straight people do.
Like
I'm kind of guessing it, right? I'm basing it off movies. I'm basing this off a movie.
Oh my god. Yeah, but
their only personality trait is being a straight white man. Like, we laugh, but that's what the case is for a lot of people who aren't a straight white man. There are a lot of characters like that.
Also, if you go into the world, if you look at a movie and then you go into the world and you like look at like diversity and how people act and how we function, no popular big studio movie has ever projected real life like it is.
No.
Yeah, you would know. If you suddenly found yourself walking around the street of a movie, you'd be like, this feels strange.
You'd be like, this is out of place. Everything is wrong.
All of these people are too similar to one another.
It's always a bit of a fantasy, to be honest, as well. So the weird thing is like
then that comes back.
So if somebody
it's
would
harmful that the fantasy is a world with only a bunch of straight white men.
Yeah, that's
you know, and some women who are there only to be friends to the straight white men,
or bisexual beings. Over-sexualized. That is something I dislike intensely, is the over-sexualization of women in films. It's dreadful. Honestly, like there are some movies that I actually hate every Pierce Brosnan James Bond movie ever, because they're just like the women turn up and they're just there for Bond to get a fucking like, banger secret out of them and then leave them.
There's stuff that we've watched before where perhaps you don't even notice straight away. And you're like, oh, this is actually really good. And then you kind of suddenly notice and you go, wow, I'm like several episodes or several halfway through. And I've only seen women here who are here in kind of a sexual capacity, or, do you know what I mean?
And there are
you
movies...
kind of suddenly realise, and it's like, it's just not enjoyable.
And there are movies in the past where I've turned to Becky and I'm like, let's watch this. I used to love this as a child. And then she'd be like, Griff, this is horribly sexist. And I'd be like, oh my God, you're right.
Yeah.
And you don't even notice when you're young, like you're just...
No, and that's fine, like if you don't... Oh, but it is harmful, but like as a kid, yeah, you know what I mean.
Well, it still comes down to
It's not easy for them to see it.
it still comes down to people like learning about that, and I feel like part of that is also to blame on like education not really focusing on that type of stuff. So
Oh, let's not get.
But
Honestly,
that's-
we're moving so
that's-
far away
that's-
from
that's
the
like-
question
I know,
of this entire episode.
This whole episode, we've
That
been
is-
like art entertainment. We've been like, no, only film, sometimes music, and also, you know, the injustices of the
Well,
world.
it is kind of interesting because I feel like I'm gonna find some other people that may have like some.
Wait, what? We're not
No,
regulars?
but-
Wait, what?
This isn't our podcast. Wait,
I
what?
signed a contract and everything,
Wait,
Bram.
there's a lot of topics that I could probably use either Griff or both of you for, but it's like for example, I'm gonna
have
do
a lot of
something on
opinions.
education, and then I'd rather have someone who's also like had an education in education that I could talk to. So
Oh, I would do Dan for that.
yeah, that would be.
Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
I have a lot of opinions about education, but let's
She has a
not get
lot of
into them.
opinions about a lot of stuff.
My main opinion about education is that our education system is fucked up and needs to be dismantled.
Anyway, moving back to the topic
Yeah.
at hand.
So we were talking about that, basically art as a way of, like, I would say, like, change. Have you ever had the feeling that it feels disingenuous, like it feels like they're pushing something that they may not believe in themselves, but it's just like too obvious? Because that's what a lot of people like. When you see something like Captain Marvel, I never really had that feeling, but there's like people who are like, oh, this is just the studio, like Marvel Studios, wanting to push a woman because that's trendy now, and they don't really believe that. But I've never really had that feeling with that example, for example.
I'm trying to think of something. I can't.
I mean,
But
I
maybe
don't know if
we
it's
know.
a bit far from the example, but something I thought of then is I thought of the Big Bang Theory, which
Yeah.
I feel like tries so hard to be like this show about relatable kind of geeky nerds and who play video games and, you know, that all of this stuff. But I think the show only manages to keep pushing forward these things about like. It's a very if you actually look, it's very kind of got a lot of toxic masculinity in that show, despite the fact that the main characters are supposed to be these kind of weedy, like nerdy guys. But it makes it often the show makes it seem like that is bad.
Yeah, it makes it like
Yeah,
and the
they
characters
take
are
most
always
of the
in competition
punches,
with
which
each other about it, and you know the main characters always make fun of each other for not having a girlfriend or for not.
and
being
I
this, that, the
recently
other.
rewatched it, and I said to Becky, they hit on Raj for being Indian so much.
Yeah, and also for.
And I was like,
anytime
that's
he's
just
feminine,
racist.
Like, he's the closest thing to the he you know, a gay character, and anytime that he is comfortable
is
in
squashed.
himself in being feminine, he's relentlessly bullied by the other main characters.
Yeah, and it is hot. And I said that to Becky when because I rewatched it over quarantine. Don't ask why. And I was just like, I remember because when we watched it when we were kids, like the first season came
Yeah.
out in like
I used to enjoy it.
2008, 7, maybe even 6. It was a long time ago. Actually, I don't think it was that long. I want to say 2009, but it doesn't matter because it was a while ago. And I said to her, like, God, as a kid, you just did not notice that because you were just giggling because, like, the soundtrack, maybe sometimes you were like, oh, people are laughing, I'll laugh too. But
Yeah,
honestly,
it's one of those shows that on a surface level, it looks like, oh yeah, this is a good show. This is kind of a show.
Yeah, it's like a stage
mainstream
sitcom,
show
it's
for
got a
kind of geeky
live
people.
audience.
It's just a bit of comedy about that, comic book store, all of that stuff.
I hope Dragon doesn't watch
but
this.
actually, at a closer look, it's very harmful. Yeah, well, I will have Dragon if you're watching this or listening to this. I will fight you.
Yeah, but it's
Also,
it's not
Love
even.
it.
Dragon,
it's-
don't get too mad because I love Friends, but it's terribly
Yes,
homophobic,
Friends is
transphobic.
So phobic to everything.
I don't even-
It's just outdated.
It's not sexist, I don't think, in some places because
No,
the cast were very serious. No, well, they were very serious about that when they were making it because the girls were like, "We're not taking that punch," and they would be very serious. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying it's not as bad as some shows that were before it.
I mean, there's always like you have to take into consideration that that's a show from a few years ago, and that definitely there has been some progress. Luckily, over years, there has.
No, I know. So we're talking about the Big Bang Theory, and it was like 2008. But like, let's talk about the last decade of our lives, and it was a very transformative decade because social media and like people could speak louder. The Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter. You know, we are living in a time where those movements get more traction because the internet screams about it. So people correct themselves, we learn, and we move forward with each other. but we are talking about a time where studio heads lived in their own bubble universe and they didn't really pay attention to audiences.
I just think though that it's not that long ago, and it is a time where these things
it's
are
not,
kind of
but
fairly
I'm
obviously wrong. Like,
but I'm saying in the last decade we've had a lot of time of people going, that's it, fuck you, we've had enough.
Yeah, I feel like definitely if you go back like 10 to 20 years, like I feel like a lot of stuff that's considered homophobic would still be considered like acceptable back then for some reason. So I don't think we can just discount like the progress of time that easily. It does definitely have an effect on it, and if you watch something that's older, you definitely need to see that times have definitely changed. Well, where they have changed, because there's probably just still gonna be things that you see like, oh, okay, that's still an issue. Good to see that. Well, bad to see that doesn't change. I was just trying sarcasm first, but if that wasn't effective, then maybe people would just be like, oh, what the fuck is he saying? So, but that's the thing what I said, like, when you were talking about the Big Bang Theory earlier, because there was one thing, and the biggest problem wasn't really touched upon, actually. It feels like the more they change from their nerdy people they were to begin with, the quirky, nerdy people they were to begin with, into, like, what would be considered the American normal, like, the more... like, the less they get made fun of, to some degree. So it's all about, like, hey, you fucking nerds, try to get normal, please. That seems like that show is eventually... That's the message that show has. But the thing is, I guess the problem is that we're always trying to attribute message to everything. Well, not everything necessarily has a message. Something can just show an absurd situation as well. But then it should probably show some type of awareness, which... that show doesn't really. I think there's nothing wrong in, for example, showing...
like, it's like in comedy or improv, you're supposed to have... You can have a ridiculous situation, and then there's usually a straight man who is the only one that kind of reacts to things like a normal person would, and everybody else in that is like, no, you're the idiot. And that kind of is always the thing that makes a situation seem more funny, is that you've got to have that straight man to kind of be the person who... reflects the audience. Yeah,
for example, I feel like when we touch upon that, I feel like an example would also be Jojo Rabbit, which a lot of people like were complaining about it, like we're thinking it was racist just because it portrayed Hitler in it, even though he was a total doofus and dumbass. That was just had nothing meaningful to attribute to anything. It was just like, hey, I'm here, I'm Hitler, I'm a dumb piece of shit. That's basically what it came down to.
And also, if you watch Jojo Rabbit, the amount of meaning in that film, it's all there. Like, it is a very poetic film, and it really, it's, I don't know, the fact that people can think that it is racist when it is so clearly kind of showing, and like also people saying, for example, that it kind of makes, like, Jojo is a good character, but Jojo, you know, was a Nazi and that's bad. But like, in the real world, in that time, there were kids who were getting sent to Nazi camps and being told things like that, you know, Jewish people are monsters and all these crazy stories. That's not, you know, that's not false.
Yeah, I don't get why
that is a true thing of the time.
I don't get why they necessarily would show him as like a bad character, because this is the redemption arc that could be for every racist or bigot, basically. Like, a lot of people who have those opinions, who are like racist or bigoted, they would basically, it is due to like some sociological thing, like either their upbringing or maybe the fact that they didn't really have to deal with any people, for example, any people who are like with different sexualities themselves, or had to deal with people of different races themselves, so they don't know what these people are like and they just hear bad things constantly. And then once they get to know someone, they could potentially change their mind up in that, and
it's like having an open mind.
I feel like that's the only thing that I could say is like that. I think one of the problems is that improvement, like people's improvement, isn't really valued enough nowadays. I feel like it's all about in the moment, and if you ever did anything bad, then you're bad somehow, even though nobody can actually
that's
live
like
up to that scrutiny.
Cancel culture that we have.
And I hope that doesn't affect art too much in that way, because
I mean, it's difficult to say, isn't it? It's like the whole thing of, like, you know, listening to an artist's music and the artist himself is obviously a very bad person. There's a few examples of that.
Yeah, I mean...
and like,
I mean, even if you...
there's been a whole conversation of if you should, do you separate the art from the artist?
I mean...
Yeah.
I for me, that's like a case-to-case basis type of thing, I guess, as well, because it also depends on the effect of the artists themselves and what the artist is trying to portray. But because let's just say that the artist is like a total piece of shit, but they seem to realize that within themselves, and their alter ego that's the art, like the let's say the person and the artist are already two different type of people, because that's definitely possible, because people have alter egos. You can easily look at something less negative. I'm not saying that it's always going to be someone bad and someone good, but for example, let's say let's just give a positive example, like someone like David Bowie, for example. He had this different type of you had the Tin White Duke, and then you had Ziggy Stardust, which were definitely different artists, to say, than the person David Bowie. And that's now an example that I give, which doesn't have any bad connection to it at that point. But let's say that a person has that. Let's say that someone is like a total racist asshole for some reason, but then, I don't know, has like an artist spin-off that doesn't necessarily hold those points, or doesn't bring them forward, or it doesn't affect their work, or it doesn't seem to affect their work, even if you look at it. Then that's a completely different story, because sometimes it comes down to playing a different part, which is similar.
And I think it also depends on like, if it's an artist who's living now and is gaining success, despite the fact that perhaps they are an awful person or they've done bad things. Like, that is one scenario, versus, finding out that an artist who is dead had done some awful things.
Yeah.
Like, how... where I to be honest, I really don't know where I stand on this matter. I don't know how I feel about, listening or enjoying art that somebody who is an awful person, because it feels like a way of you're still supporting that person, but if they're dead or in prison or any of the above, like, how is it supporting them? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, example, like, I remember when that whole Michael Jackson thing came out, and I was like, but I really enjoy some of his music, so what do I do with myself now? Can I listen to Thriller every Halloween, or am I supporting a man who did creepy ass things?
It's hard to say, isn't it? Because difficult. For me, if I think about listening to Michael Jackson, I'm like, I feel a bit guilty. I'm like, should I?
Me too. Yeah, me too. And it's this weird moral question that you just ponder, and it has no resolving answer.
I mean, you don't want to show support for that sort of person. You don't want to make anybody who is that type of person feel like they could gain success despite their awfulness.
I mean, for me, it's it's the same again with like the split of the artist and the arts. The artist and the person itself as well. So, I don't really have much of a problem with that, especially with someone that's dead like Michael Jackson. I mean, you're not really supporting anything there. You're just basically listening.
Yeah, but if you're with someone, you're like, let's listen to Michael Jackson, and like.
The problem with it for me is that I feel like by listening to Michael Jackson, despite the fact that you're not supporting Michael Jackson, somebody who is similar to Michael Jackson today might see you listening to Michael Jackson and think that you support that's Michael Jackson. I've said Michael Jackson too many times.
It's also
it's getting weird now.
That also feels like kind of a weird example, because it was never really full on proven, so we could be basically slandering someone who didn't really do anything. It was just a weird person and eventually never really did any of that. Because there's a lot of stuff that, for example, with those documentaries, that was like kind of inaccurate and that type of stuff. So I don't really know how to feel about that example.
I don't really know.
Specifically. But if you know someone who's...
That's the other thing, is if it's somebody who you don't really know. Like, are they good or bad or not at all? Like, what are you supposed to do about that?
Yeah, that's also a problem, because you don't know for the longest time. I feel like, personally, what I think is more important is your personal connection to the piece of art, rather than the connection between the artist and the what do you get out of it. That could change. For example, if you hear something in a piece of art and it's like, oh, this kind of didn't sound like that, but it sounds racist to me now, or it sounds bigoted to me now because of this or this reason, then that's obviously a valid reason to just drop that piece of art and not...
Yeah, certainly it's a very black and white case of, like, for example, if the art itself is, for example, racist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously cancel the art. There's no argument about that. But what do you do if the artist is, for example, racist, but perhaps you have a very personal connection to a piece of art that they've made? you already have it. Perhaps it's a CD that you listen to a lot, or a painting, or anything like that. And what do you do in that situation? I don't know.
Well, it is still the fact that you have your connection to that piece of art, and that's not necessarily that doesn't necessarily condone the whatever the artist does, because that may just be like a totally different aspect of that person that you're basically in line with. What if a piece of art, for example, would show something? Let's say that a piece of art just looks like very much like it's opposed to racism or something, and then you find out that the artist is racist. I mean,
well, here's an extreme fantastical example.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do if you had, for example, a piece of pottery and you loved it very much, and it had been passed down your family, and you were like, wow, this is amazing, I love it, it is the best thing I've ever seen, and then you find out that Hitler had made that bit of pottery?
Yeah.
I would probably want to sell it because it would be worth a lot of money, but
Wow, Bram has turned that situation on your head.
Oh no. So you're just going to sell it to a racist.
Yeah, but maybe-
Blood
Wait,
money.
wait.
Blood fucking money.
oh, if it what if it wasn't, what if you sell it to some racist and then you donate the money to like Black Lives Matter or something? Then that
Oh my god.
Oh my
then
god.
you used the racist.
So many layers.
Here's the
Then
thing
you
though,
used
what
to
you've done in that
racist
situation is you have in fact cancelled the art as well. You have said, I don't want this art anymore, even though it's been passed down your family and you loved it very much.
Yeah.
And then you turned out it was a terrible thing, and you were like, "Fuck
So
it,
you said,
I'll use
no, I
it for
don't
good."
want
But
this
you have
anymore
cancelled.
due to the artist.
Yeah, at that point, well,
Wow.
So maybe that does make it kind of black and white. Maybe you should be cancelling art that belongs to
Love
people who
more
are bad.
questions.
it does still depend, because now you have to like the example of a vase that was done by Hitler, who know what the fuck he stored in there or some shit.
Oh no, where's that
Maybe-
going?
Or, maybe a poem about romance.
Oh. Can I compare thee
I
to
mean,
a summer's day?
It's like Hitler is just such an an extreme example for anything. Like,
But that's what I mean. I'm trying to like kind of show how,
but that's the thing that basically
like,
takes
silly it
takes
is
some
almost.
that takes
because it
the
seems black and white with Hitler.
well it kind of takes a
But also-
nuance away to some degree.
Here's an example that we will understand because we've all watched something that this person created. Do you remember when the Guardians of the Galaxy director, Sean Gunn? He came out, someone resurfaced some tweets about paedophilia that he was in support of. And we were all like, oh my god, what do we do? And it was this weird,
I don't know. That's another thing.
so like this
it's actually
movie that we
quite
love, can we not love it
It's
anymore?
quite difficult with a film on
Yeah.
a level, because a film, it has such a humongous crew that goes to, especially a big film like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. That's
I mean,
That's an interesting one because
An
it's one that
interesting
we've all
one with film.
forgotten. He'd still
pretty
because
black.
I remember
It can be more black and white with just like a painting or a bit of music that one person has created.
yeah, and it was but for him it was like 2009 tweets of him. I literally can't remember the paedophilic tweets, but they were terrible.
Well,
I
it's-
remember reading them and going, "Holy
it's
shit!"
even the same if it's like a band, for example, and you would have like just a bassist or something. Yeah, it's like, hey, he turns out to be a pedophile, but like the rest of the band just like disowns him immediately and
Yeah.
that type of shit. Then you can't really have a problem with that band, in my opinion, because they may not have known, and at the point that they know, they just like fuck this guy, that type of stuff. So
yeah,
it's the same with a movie, because if you have like an entire cast, I feel like it's almost disrespectful towards the other people's work that they put in there to just like negate that because one person involved was had some.
If a movie that Becky has worked on, and let's say the director again got something terrible, and that everyone just boycotted the movie, I'd be really pissed off because I know that she has worked hard and blood, sweat, and tears into the movie, and I'll be like, that's bullcrap.
Yeah.
But it is all.
The other thing is there are a lot of artists in that movie that may have, they may have been still that's their living, that film, and if it doesn't do well,
I mean,
they're kind of losing their living, and it's
it's
not
buggered.
the person themselves.
It gets even worse than that if you think about it. What about a movie like that's to do with like Harvey Weinstein, for example, and one of his or multiple of his victims are in the movie? If we're gonna condemn the movie, then we're gonna condemn the victim at the same time as the person who did the crime. Yeah. That's horrible, right?
This is now just turned into a moral question.
Yeah, let's change the name of the podcast
segment.
I mean,
we should have
The Good Place.
Philosophy and psychology and.
I mean, I did know that when we were gonna assess art and entertainment, I know that there was gonna be a moral aspect to it because I mean that's.
Yeah.
Well, there is with anything in life if you think
art
about
and
it.
Entertainment is just such a broad topic. And it's very difficult.
And some of it is super deep. Yeah. Some of it is super deep, and some of it is so surface level. Like you can look at it and think, "Oh, that thing." So I think that is the beauty. That is the beauty.
I mean, yeah,
of
maybe we're stuck on this particular impasse a bit too long. Let's say this is like this outlook.
Yeah.
I mean, there is gonna be that type of like. There's definitely gonna be a bit of a moral outlook, even in the question. Because actually the question that I posed in the beginning was more like, is there like entertainment and art, where does it split? Like what type of entertainment would not be considered art and that type of stuff? Like in answering that question, I feel like a moral aspect does come forward, and I feel like that needed to be addressed, and that's a hard thing, so it takes more time.
Thinking about the separation between entertainment and art, I've been thinking about this whole time. I keep trying to think about it because for me, when I was younger, I grew up in circuses and stunt shows.
Mm-hmm.
And stunt shows specifically I think of. And at first, I kind of was like, oh yeah, a stunt show is just entertainment in my head because it is just, I don't know, I just thought of it as entertainment. But the more I think about it, I start to think that it is kind of a form of art as well. And it's difficult to find a distinction because the individuals in a stunt show are people who have worked hard on their specific art of whatever skill it is that they do, you know. Sometimes it's setting someone on fire. Sometimes it's, which I think is just entertainment. But there's also people who have, you know, the effort, you know, the like the BMX guys and anybody who has like a very specific skill and it's an art that they've honed for a long time.
Yeah, and that is the beautiful thing.
And that's
like
art there, so I don't really know. I actually don't know where the distinction is. I thought about it
because that's,
and I didn't know.
That's
yeah, exactly.
That's where you touch on. I mean, I don't really have a guest for this type of thing. But we did touch on something there because entertainment, like sports, would fall under entertainment. But at one point, there's probably some artistic bridge there as well towards sports.
Yeah, because I think a lot of sports, and I'm obviously talking about extreme sports when I talk about stunt show and circus, but a lot of people would call sports their art. It's their personal art, and I don't know. And even like something like, especially a circus, usually there's like I said before, art I feel like has a story. A circus always has a story. The performances link up in a certain way. You know, there's costume design, and that's considered art.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so I don't really.
Well, that could kind of, like, I mean, because if we say that, like, you could continue on the link and include it, because for example, if we speak like something, I mean, nobody's really interested in that here, but like something like soccer, for example, I guess you could say for people who are really invested in a team that there is some kind of a story there. Let's say like a star player, for example, who has an injury and has to come back from that. Like, I feel like that's part of a story that's for some could be like it's part of the entertainment, because it would be silly to actually claim and I'm saying this as an outsider, someone who doesn't really care about sports, but it would be silly to claim that all that the personal stuff that has an effect on the sports itself isn't really part of the story or the entertainment itself, because when you say, for example, someone who gets injured, that doesn't really happen. Like, even if it happens off field while they were training or something, that's still part of the story and the entertainment of the sport itself, right?
Well, I was just thinking, and people often say like art is, you know, in the eye of the beholder and all of that stuff. And I think we're talking about things like, oh, some people would consider, like, you know, football to be sport, to be art, because, you know, it's something they're very personally attached to. And I think the difference perhaps is that entertainment is something that doesn't really change you or make you feel particularly strongly. It doesn't necessarily make you cry. It's just kind of something that you kind of passively experience, whereas I think art is something that you might get a little bit more invested in, and it has the potential to kind of affect you in a different, more strong way. So I think it definitely, perhaps art and entertainment, the separation is actually in the audience and in the way that it affects an audience.
But that would still include, like, that would definitely then still include sports like that, or like soccer and that type of stuff, because that makes...
So like some people might consider a certain sport to be entertainment to them, but I think at the same time it also, for some people it's just entertainment, for some people it's just art. Some people might consider a film just to be entertainment, whereas I'm sure me and Griff would definitely confidently say that it is a art form.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
but some
like,
people
if we
only think of film as entertainment.
Because also, like, going back to college days, we were set this... we could be set in a room and they'd say, okay, film this scene. And people, like, if you didn't know what to do, you'd just stick a camera in someone's face. But that wouldn't be very good. What if you pulled back the angle and you did it behind someone's shoulder? That would make it look like, as a viewer, you were watching it from a passive perspective, not just up in their face. Like, it is an art form. And yeah. Anyway,
so yes,
fully can't speak now.
I'd probably passionately say that it is an art form, as would I.
But
definitely there are some people who would say, "Oh no, a film is just entertainment."
That's now we're mainly touching also on the people who are consuming it, which is like more like, again, with like I said before, which is somewhat more utilitarian, like in the way it's used, like how people use it, for example. But there is still another thing that we haven't really touched upon when it comes to the distinction itself as well. Like, this is not really, because if we could go on about art in general, we could say a million more things, but one important thing when it comes to art versus entertainment, like comparing them and where the basically the break line or the schism basically lies within that, we haven't really touched upon, like, learning, like artists in training, basically, which is something, I mean, you could basically say that if you're an artist, your whole life is you're in training, and you basically die mid-training still, which is basically a sad...
to be honest, I would agree. Certainly anything creative, I feel like I probably do agree with the statement that your whole life you're kind of training for it, because creativity kind of draws on your experiences. And I think art definitely draws on your experiences, and that's how you, like, yes, there's obviously for film, for anything, you're learning specific techniques, and you go to school and you will learn the technicalities. Yep. But I think when it comes to actually the creation of art and actually the creativity, you can't be taught that, I don't think. I think it's to do with the experience, and I think you are always learning.
I feel like
for that.
Yeah, no, I don't think as an artist you should, if you stop learning as an artist, first off, you're not a very good artist, and second off, you are not trying to improve yourself at the particular skill or the particular style of thing that... Thank you. But I think that's just lazy. Don't stop and think you're the best. There is always room for improvement.
Yeah,
if you...
the masters of any field would say the same thing to you. The masters of every field will always say, "Oh, I always consider every day to be, I'm learning something new.
A new challenge." Yeah. There's never a similar day. Every day is different.
And there isn't.
It also because some people take that a bit too literally as well. It, like, some people think, like, if you're like in film and that's your passion, that, like, you're always gonna have to basically try to learn the new stuff about film. But it could also be indirectly as well. For example,
if I may use an example, is video games, because. And I could use this example, both of you don't try and punch me, but the storytelling of a Naughty Dog game, such as Uncharted, The Last of Us, Telltale games, you've got the Walking Dead season, that is, you're interactively involved in that world, and it is a beautiful thing, and it is so enjoyable, but there are a lot of things that I know. So an example of a director who uses video games a lot in his work is, I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but is the guy who directed Kong Skull Island, the monster movie that happened about 2 years ago. And he plays a lot of video games, and he is very involved. And he says the storytelling that happened in video games back in the PlayStation 2 era, Metal Gear Solid, he uses that to help him try and say, oh, so I did it in this way in this video game, so maybe as an audience member they want to feel that within a movie. And it is all this stuff, like you pluck what you want from different places, and again comes back to Becky reading a lot of books when she was younger. You pluck different story elements. Art does feed art,
books.
And it will never stop. If art stopped feeding art dries up instantaneously. It just dries up. Yeah. There is nothing left.
I have other examples for would be even it could go drier. It could go to theory. Let's say that you're someone who's active in movies, and you do a bit of everything, or you're a director. So basically, you're very much who's like very much hands-on involved. Reading like something like sociology or philosophy or something like psychology could basically get you to have like a better handle on understanding the characters that you write that have been written, and then you can see like how does that translate into example like I feel like this camera angle doesn't seem right for what we're trying to convey, like, or what this character thinks, and we're basically trying to get through the essence of this character in this scene. We want to basically establish this character, and the way it's been done now doesn't really fit psychologically with the profile of this character. I feel like that stuff is also things that people can like. Some people tend to hyper focus too much on their art and forget that other things can help them.
It doesn't have to be, for example, something as black and white as I like reading and that feeds my filmmaking and love for film. It could be something as like somebody who is a director might also enjoy physics or something that seems so far away from it. Yeah. But that is still experiences that you can use to tell a story. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It doesn't matter what it is. That will always be involved in art, because art is kind of a reflection of the real world. So anything that you're learning in the real world, any other hobby that you have, can feed into your creativity and your art. But then there was the one question that we didn't get to that was basically leading into as well as at what point does like a student like become like a full-on artist, and when does what they produce become actual art? Difficult question. I would say, as we were saying, you're always learning, so I think in a way you're kind of always a student of whatever kind of medium that you're doing. I would say if you're at a point perhaps where you can teach other people about it, then you're definitely at a point kind of past just being a normal student. But to be honest, I don't really know. I don't think there is a point that you stop being a student.
You don't stop.
Never.
That's maybe I should rephrase the question. So you don't. It's clear like you don't really stop being a student yourself. But when does what you produce count as art?
From the beginning.
Or so you would say that any type of sketch you make and potentially throw away if you're into.
Yeah.
I think if somebody has the intentions for it to be a piece of art and they start it, and regardless of how much they've learned, I think it counts from the beginning. I think it is. As long as there's been some sort of intention there, then yeah. I'm
almost on board. I think that there's the intention thing is very important. But let's say that I make some sketches and stuff and I throw them away. That's definitely part of the process. But I would feel that the moment when I would call something art myself is when I feel like I finished that.
I think perhaps for me personally, if I was trying to create, for example, a film, the thing that would make me feel like I had succeeded is if I had somebody else other than me watch the film, and for them to feel something that I intended them to feel. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think at that point that you're successful is, say for example, I wanted to make a film that was a comedy, and I had people watch the film. It doesn't matter how many people, even just one person watched it, and they laughed when I wanted them to laugh. then I would say that is a success at that point.
Yeah.
And I would say that is the point you have kind of gone past. It becomes what you expected. Although I will say
Yeah.
that I do think you're always kind of making art, like, from whatever,
Well, a
2-year-old.
You're always kind of working at it as well, because like what's like a sketch or like a bit of like a mock-up of like a riff or something of a song, or like a chord progression or something that could always be like made just be an unfinished product at this point, but it always has the potential to become full on art. And I think,
yeah, but I think it definitely lies within the audience and the audience
mm-hmm.
reaction. When somebody other than you, looks at that painting and feels something, or interprets it in a certain way, or watches the film and all of that stuff, that
mm-hmm.
it's to do with the audience, I think.
That kind of brings me to another question, because at that point, that's where you basically have someone watch it, and that's kind of feels like it's at a finished point. But what would you say the same if you're like kind of still working at it and you're not really finished and you just want an opinion of someone, and they basically look at it while you're still in progress of making it? Would that be the same, or would you be like, okay, it's finished and I showed it to someone and then I get the intended reaction and that's when it counts? Or would it also?
Well, I think it's a personal thing. I think that's the problem, is that I couldn't say broadly for all art when it is finished or when it is when you've succeeded, because I think it's a personal thing. It is your personal art is very personal. It's you have a certain story or a certain thing that you want to achieve, and it's up to you to kind of decide when you've achieved that. Like I say, for me, I think it's when I've managed to make an audience member feel or react the way I want them to.
Yeah. So.
But for somebody else, it might be different.
Yeah, I can understand that, because for me it's like I would have to have something finished first and then have like a reaction to it, so maybe for me to have it actually count. Because I've had like people that I've showed people demos of like songs and stuff, and even if there's like a positive reaction to that, I still don't feel like it's not finished at that point. So couldn't consider it like.
What would you say? When do you consider it finished? And
when I actually say like, okay, this is how I want it, and I could possibly still do some tweaks, but that's just seems useless. But I'll just at this point I'm satisfied with it. And I'm gonna leave it as like basically like this moment in time. This is what I'd want out of this. And now if somebody else responds to it and it's a positive reaction, or multiple people react to it, then I would say, okay, that's the point where it could be considered art.
Yeah, I would say perhaps it's to do with the goal that you have in your head at the start of making something. So you decide, and you yourself are the only one that can decide when it's met that goal. And then a kind of confirmation and a way of saying, okay, it's art now, is then after that point when somebody has reacted to it. And
because I feel like that's one of the big problems that you have with like I say, for example, when you have like maybe bigger directors or people are really invested in their art, and they may necessarily not focus too much on like what's popular and just want to do their own thing. Like sometimes there seems to be this type of like weird type of jealousy where people like they like the fact that they're different, but at the same time they don't like it because it means that less people may be inclined to see their art the same way they see it. Mm-hmm. It's like a bit of a inner conflict that some people as artists may have. Like they may be like, okay, I don't buy into this popular stuff, I don't want to make anything that's exactly like this, but then at the same time they know this full well, they don't want to do this. And at the same time, they kind of get disappointed because they don't get the same appeal, they get the same mass appeal as people who do basically want to go for like a broader audience and are like, okay, I'm just going to try and get this stuff and I'm going to hit all the pointers to make this popular. There's this type of jealousy there that's it's kind of like, I guess it's kind of... it's kind of understandable, but at the same time it's not really logical, because well, you set out to not do anything that's supposed to be super popular, so you can't really be too disappointed that it doesn't get super popular, or that doesn't for example, any art house movie, if you set out to do an art house movie, you can't really be disappointed that you're not going to hit the same viewers, like viewing level as like a as like a Marvel movie or something. So I mean, it's kind of like, you know how the world is, so it's not like you're gonna change it like that immediately.
No. I've got nothing to add. You guys have really opened up more than I was ever gonna.
Wow, that's a
Oh dear.
you know that's a special occasion. We just should really relish this, because the moment when you can just get Griff to shut up, or just have nothing to add anymore.
Now that is art.
Because Griff is like definitely outspoken. So
Wow.
I mean, if Griff always has something to say. There's the moment when Griff doesn't have anything to say anymore. Wow.
Whoa. Wow, I am being pummeled right now. Oh my god! I was just sitting there genuinely listening to you two, and here I am. This is what you get, kids. You just get pummeled with your friends on the podcast. This is what life leads to. Ah. Oh dear.
No, I'm just kind of genuinely surprised as well, because this doesn't happen all that often.
That's so rude.
God.
I can be quiet.
No, it's not just the fact that you're quiet, it's that you don't have anything to add anymore.
No, because you're covering it all. Like, honestly, I no, that's not even going to relate to the podcast. What I was about to say, so it doesn't matter.
It was gonna go too far away.
It really was.
But then I have one more point that we didn't really touch on, which has to do with this. I mean, like I said, if it's art in general or entertainment in general, we could do a lot more things. But if it comes to the comparison between both, there's one more thing that we haven't really touched, and that is basically more commercial type, what could be considered art. For example, if you look at the Coca-Cola logo, which is just basically a brand staple, it's like, hey, this is Coca-Cola. When you see this, you think about Coca-Cola and maybe all the other brands that are associated with Coca-Cola. That's like a type of thing in itself, but some people wouldn't consider that art.
It's hard to say, because you would say whoever designed that logo.
I was going to say that's art.
You would
That's
call them an
boom.
artist.
And the person who created the taste of Coke, that's an art. I don't know how to fucking make a drink.
Yeah,
I mean,
cooking.
yeah.
Cooking,
Well,
God shit at it, burn everything.
Well, yeah, I'm definitely not gonna acknowledge that cooking is not I'm definitely gonna acknowledge that cooking is an art. So
I was going to say, Bram, if you say it's not an art, are you drunk? What's wrong with you?
Then I would be drunk. Yeah.
Are you high?
I would be drunk and
Yeah, you'd
high at the
probably
same
be
time
high.
if I would say that
Yeah.
cooking is not an art. That's definitely.
That's the problem with art, is it's just so subjective, because there are so many
And
things that
that,
we can.
and that's what, like, my final point was going to be. Everything we said is extremely subjective. If you like it, if you hate it, if you don't have an opinion on it, if you have a strong opinion on it, fantastic. And that's so beautifully human of everyone, that art can be so subjective. And I think that is the beautiful thing about art, that it can be whatever you want it to be, whatever you need it to be, whatever it has to be in your mind. It is the beautiful thing that it is this open-ended thing that everyone can be included in, and love or hate it as much, but it exists in our world.
And I think certainly for me, I could never. If somebody considers themselves an artist and the things that they make an artist, I am not going to argue with that, because I think that it is up to the artist, and I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't refuse that.
I feel.
Of someone.
I feel you could joke about some really poor design at one point, or that type of stuff. You could laugh at that at some point, which is basically more a reaction to the thing itself, and the impracticality of stuff. Definitely, if it's like something that's designed to be practical at the same time, not just art.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna be in conversation with an artist, and I feel like this is a bit of a different, like, your reaction to the art is valid, even if your reaction is like, what the fuck is this shit, or
Yes.
it looks stupid, or who the fuck designed this type of shit. I feel like all that things, even negative reactions, are valid to the art itself. But if you were ever...
Yeah, on the flip side, as the artist yourself, you have to accept, for example, if you make a painting and somebody doesn't see it the same way you do, you have to accept that is how somebody is going to react to it. Or a film, somebody might not like it. That is something that you have to accept.
But
so for me, like, I might say that I don't like a piece of art or something that somebody has made, but I'm always gonna acknowledge that, you know, they are an artist, and that is the art that they've created. It doesn't matter if it's, in my eyes, bad or good.
I mean, you could ruin someone's art for themselves if you look like something. Let's say like somebody designed something, and it's like, this looks like a big fat floppy penis, and then the artist like, no.
Right, how did I fucking knew you were gonna use that as a fucking
and
example?
And then the artist comes back and it's like, no.
Damn it.
And then he looks at his art and it's like, shit, it does. No, my art. That can happen, right?
Well, that returns to me and Becky. We cannot watch films and think that's a shit edit. Like, what's the point of that? I feel queasy because it just out of place. It's really like, funny though.
It wasn't bad, but it's when we watched what the fuck is it called? The film that's all shot in one shot.
Oh, 1917.
Yeah, we spent both of us were
an entire film. It was awful.
The cuts. Because obviously it's
and they were really easy to see.
Not actually all shot in one shot. They have multiple days of shooting. So we were both looking for those cuts.
We were, and honestly,
wouldn't have even thought to look for them.
No, but for me, Becky, I'm pretty sure we got like 90% of them. Like they were quite easy to see.
No, I don't think they were easy to see. I think they were easy.
Well,
for
some of them
us
like
as film shooters.
Oh yeah, no. I apologize.
They would use.
I did not specify that it was easy for people who understand the language, but for casual
I'm not a filmmaker, so I don't know. But isn't it easier if it's black and white and high contrast or something to hide cuts in like objects dark objects that pass by and that type of stuff?
Personally, I don't know that, but
I haven't heard
the
that before,
theory
but
behind
I
that.
can see why.
The theory behind it, I'd be like, yeah, totally, I can absolutely see that. But honestly, I don't know.
The most common technique that was used in I've forgotten again, 1917.
1917.
Yeah, was
it 1918? I'm gonna Google it.
It was usually an object going in front of the camera.
Yeah,
it was the one that I remember. I was like, how did no one notice that? There's one where.
Space.
Yeah, black space.
There was one like it moved. It was 1917. It moved behind like a cannon that wasn't being used.
Or the amount of times there was like a random rock or
a tree or a human.
Usually when you're watching something, things directly in the foreground try not to be obvious for you to see them, but sometimes the camera would just pass behind them, and it was obviously a moment in which, because it's easy to cut that. A stationary, the way that you cut stuff is you need kind of a stationary object on the screen that is going to be matched across days.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, go to the second shark attack moment in Jaws, and there's a moment where the sheriff is watching a kid in the water, and people are walking in front of him. And they're using people's legs and like people's movement in front of the cameras to show his nervous, his anxiety on the kid, and hyper focusing on this particular situation by using the legs to cut forwards, like right up until the moment, and then pull right back again. If you're confused, that is the best example I've got.
Yeah, that's another thing is just filling the screen filling the frame with anything. That was kind of a common.
And trust me, again,
like,
the example
whether
is
it's
fantastic.
A black screen as you're walking through like a tunnel or a door.
Yeah.
Anything like that, because if you have a wide screen with a lot of detail, it's a lot harder to make sure that that's equal on both. Between cuts, but
I think I've seen a video once where they were pointing out all the cuts in, was it Birdman? I think.
I've never seen Birdman. I keep meaning to fucking see it because it's one of those. It's a one-shot continuous film, and I've never seen it. It's really annoying me.
But saying all this, as a casual viewer, you shouldn't be noticing those cuts because the point of editing is to not notice that anything has happened.
Please don't.
That's
exactly.
How you know
Even
it's a good cut. If you notice the cut, it's bad. That's probably, unless it's an intentional thing, but.
And also, like, if it flows with a scene, and we're not talking like a one-shot scene like 1917 or Birdman.
Are an example of an obvious cut that are there for a purpose and to make you notice.
But if
something's changed.
if you're just watching a scene and it's a conversation between two people, this was the first example we got given at college. It was like you got a conversation between two people and you have to cut it. So like, because the dialogue, the body language, the actors, the scene, the setting, and the edit, you don't want to notice that the camera went, oh, someone's face, oh, someone else's face, oh my god, it cut cut again. Like you don't. That's
There's a
not
lot
how
that
you
have
react
do
to a
in
film.
terms of kind of the way that stuff is facing to make
Yeah.
the audience not have to think about
So,
where
like,
you are in the room.
It's so basic example. If someone finishes a sentence, and there's a moment pause, your brain's automatically like, oh, so is the other person going to start talking? Because if the camera holds on the person, you know that they're the more interesting part of the scene. But if it cuts and it's straight to the next person, you're like, that's how conversation goes.
Little tip for any filmmakers out there: don't always just cut to whoever's speaking. Sometimes the most important thing is whoever's reacting, and you need to see what their face is doing as they listen to the speech.
Because acting is reacting.
Oh yeah, baby.
Oh yeah, baby.
I mean, even I don't know the exact number, but I think most communication is like 75% body language.
Oh yeah, no,
so,
absolutely.
I mean, that's a psychological fact, I guess. That's best to know if you're into film or anything like that, or even just like other types of visual art.
And once again, that comes back to what we started at the beginning, which was show and tell.
Yeah.
And the example I used
Show
from Knives
not
Out with
tell.
the guy. Thank you.
I feel like I feel like you could take that rule too far as well. If there's just like characters become unnaturally like if they don't say much because they don't want to say anything that sounds like exposition.
But then that could become a bit of a genre piece where it's like this person's mute, so it is literally all about body language, and it's all about how this person acts and reacts to a world around them. But
it's like if somebody's like a tour guide, they couldn't really be like, and point at the building. And then
it's got arches and a door somewhere around here.
I mean,
I believe it might have a ceiling. We're not quite sure.
I mean, obviously, like
it's not in the frame, so I'm not sure. But I think there's a ceiling in here.
I mean,
but I'm not. If you cut over, we might be able to see. I'm not sure yet though, because until it's on frame, I don't actually know. So it has to be in the frame for me to know about it.
I mean, what I wanted to say is even with the show don't tell, it also comes down to the character, what the characters are basically, and how they would speak. If somebody's like it's
also sometimes showing not telling is to do with what you're not showing the camera.
Yeah,
can be very important. The things that you purposely omit from the frame or from the camera.
Also, think about it.
Part of it.
Think about it. Some of the best horror films out there, you sometimes just never see the monster.
A horror film. The quicker you see the monster in a horror film,
the shittier it is.
And that is why I hate it, because you are desensitized to it so quickly because he's on the screen so often. It's just not scary anymore. Your brain can imagine far more scarier things than we can ever create on screen, and so it's much more scary when something is hidden. And that's why, it's more scary if you just see like a tail going around the corner, and your mind produces what else could be there. That's why people are afraid of the dark, because they're imagining what could be in the darkness. And
also, I'm gonna use Jaws as an example again. You hardly ever see the shark.
Yeah.
Like because the shark. This is a fun fact for you. They first off ran out of money, and second off, the shark that they tried to use underwater, because the shark was going to be in a lot of like the physical actual scenes of like people you were going to see it in or whatever. But they ran out of money, and the shark almost hardly ever worked underwater. The whole contraption they used. So to show where the shark was, they used barrels. Like they used water buoys, and then you could like it would attach. I can't fucking speak. Attach to the shark, and then it would move around. You wouldn't see the shark, but you know where he is, and that's That's like you would imagine him to be this big, fucking terrifying thing.
But the
first
biggest
scene
mistake horror movies make is desensitizing the audience immediately by having too much. Sometimes it's enjoyable for people, but too much gore and the monsters and people get killed really quickly, and everything happens in the first 5 minutes.
Can we please also use? This Becky is going to wholeheartedly agree with this example, but everyone watch Hereditary, okay? Just watch it. That's and I know that sounds like a film like everyone says like watch Hereditary. It's a really good art house film, but
and the good thing about
so much not showing you, and it's creepy
when
as shit.
Anything does happen on screen that is kind of terrifying. There's one particular shot that Griff, I'm sure you'll know which one I'm thinking of, but it is kind of smash cut onto the street.
Oh God, no, not that.
It's high contrast, and it is like one of the only shots that actually is kind of gory.
I'm thinking of two. There's two,
a couple, but like it's those moments are used to great effect as they are kind of almost shockingly. You're not expecting it. It's a surprise.
Well,
They don't really build the tension too much like that. It's just suddenly it's like, and that's scary.
No, it's not like music builds. It's like someone's just like sitting there, they're reading a book, and then BAM! It's there. It's in your face. Fucking terrifying. As an example, Becky and I, we do not like the It movies because it's a lot of boom, scary thing, or really loud music in your face. Like, it's not scary, it's just overwhelming your senses to make you have a reaction.
I mean, I feel like there needs to be some silence for there actually to be a decent reaction to something.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The thing is, there's two big differences between horror movies, because we're like kind of like treating it like, if you want an effective horror movie, it makes it sound like one thing, but there's two extremely distinct type of horror movies, and it all has to deal with who's the main character, basically. Some horror movies generally actually seem like the monster itself is more of a main character, and all the characters are basically there just to throw away and for you to enjoy how the monster just disposes of them. That's a type of movie which was popular mostly in the 80s. That's the 80s type of horror movie. And now the more like narrative driven, where you have like a main character who's more like the victim type thing. That's like a more like modern type. It doesn't always work, especially when they take beloved 80s horror movies where people expect more of the schlocky, like, haha, these people are gonna get killed in funny ways.
Well, that's a slasher.
So I guess that was definitely an interesting conversation to be had. A lot of it did come down to the fact that a lot of it is definitely subjective, and that the effect if whether or not something is art basically comes down to the person beholding the art. It's and the intention of the artist as well. I mean, if an artist is gonna say that something's not necessarily art, but the person's gonna be like, who's gonna be the one that's right there? I feel like everyone's entitled to their opinion, and not just the people who created.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like we said, it is the beautiful thing about art. So subjective, and if you like it, yay. If you don't like it, cool. That's so fine, because that's how you function in this world. And that is the beautiful thing about art. It includes everyone in the conversation. Just, I think the one thing I'd say is don't be a dick about your opinion. Like, you can have a discussion like we did. Do you not remember 13 Reasons Why earlier, where Becky fucking hates it, and, I watched it for entertainment factor. I'm just saying, like, have a civil discussion about art. That's all I'm saying. Behave yourselves.
And I feel like there's one thing that we did touch on, which basically could be almost seen as something objective. That's the fact whether or not something is art is if it's like stirs up something within you, like an emotion or something. If you get a connection to it, like a genuine connection to it, like, it is art. That's basically what we can say. And it doesn't matter what the medium is. It doesn't matter what it's intended to do, as long as you have a connection with it, which has either something that changes your opinion on something, or if it's if it's basically like awakens some type of emotion within you, then, I mean, go ahead and consider it art, I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's nothing really more to add to that particular statement, because you're right.
I know that kind of, with the first thing, I kind of means that, like, people just debating and talking stuff could be considered art, but then I guess, well, don't see a real problem with that.
Yes, Brown, this podcast is an art. If you're looking for a compliment, yes, this podcast is an art form.
Wow.
Jeez Louise.
No.
Digging for it, man. Jeez.
I was actually talking about actual people who have, like, who don't agree with each other, maybe, like, talking, and we agree too much for this to actually be a discussion where somebody changes their mind. Maybe some viewer changes their minds, and then maybe it counts.
Maybe. Oh dear. Anyway, there we go. I hope you had your fill, everyone.
Yeah. And I mean, I could say we will be back, but I don't know I don't know which topic I'm gonna do next. I don't know.
Bram will be back,
but I'm gonna be back, and I'm always gonna make sure to have guests who are interested in the topic, at least. I mean, that's a minimum, I hope.
Oh, I was gonna say that's like a basic living requirement to be on a topic podcast.
Gotta
Have an opinion.
gotta be honest. If you get like 20 viewers maximum, I mean, I can't really put my put too many demands on my guests, right?
You don't know. You can have high standards.
Okay, next week we're gonna have the debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump live here.
It's definitely gonna be a conversation.
Even though I don't even live in America.
He's as far away from American politics as he could be.
Oh my god.
Dear.
Well, anyway, I guess we'll end it here, and we'll see you next time.
I don't even know.
Bye.
This was fun.
I'll just edit it at the end.
I'm not saying this. I'm not saying this before the podcast is actually finished or anything. I swear.